Welcome to the October 9th, 2017 meeting of the City Council, the successor agency to the Redevelopment Agency, the Housing Authority. It's our regular meeting. Before we do the Pledge of Allegiance, I was wondering if we could take a moment. A couple things this last week. Obviously, the tragedy in Las Vegas, and then, of course, last evening and today, the tragedy in Napa and Sonoma counties. It just seems like we did this last week for the folks in Texas and Florida. But if we could just take a moment of silence for the folks in Las Vegas and the folks in north of us in those two counties, please. Thank you very much. Why don't we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll end on that. I was reminded of the fact that the other item that happened was also in Puerto Rico. There's so many, it seems like now, it's hard to keep up. It's terrible what's happening. So we'll also keep those folks in Puerto Rico in our prayers also. Item number 3, changes to the order of agenda. Anyone have changes this evening?
I do, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask council if you would consider pulling consent calendar item 7E, which is adopt a resolution approving recommended improvements included in the pedestrian safety improvement plan for San Carlos Avenue, off of this agenda, and I'll re-agendize that item for a future council meeting. We've had some questions that are better addressed in a closed session environment that we'd like to handle before the item comes back to you.
All right, so we'll remove 7E from consent. Okay? Anything else? All right, report from closed session, Mr. Rubens.
There's no report from the closed session tonight.
Okay, next item is presentation. Present a proclamation to Craig Baker upon his retirement from the San Carlos Elementary School District. And I'm going to ask Mark Olbert, my colleague, who worked with Mr. Baker on the school board, to present this. So, Mark? Should get a microphone. And thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You want to join me up front, old man? Come on. By the way, I have to explain to everybody here, since Craig is obviously younger than I am. I don't remember. Eli Kane, so I can hit you with it. We just started calling each other that years ago. I don't remember why exactly. So, but you know, Craig, we're here just to honor what you did for the children of San Carlos, and by extension, the community of San Carlos, in your leadership of the San Carlos School District. Probably help if I turn this on. It is on. Okay. But the list of things you've done and the value you've added to the community is way too long to go through. So we have a proclamation which details a bunch of it. But I just want to say that on behalf of everybody here and behalf of the community, you did a great job. We will miss you. You know, when I left the board years ago, I got my colleagues really mad when I said that your destiny involved a bigger district than San Carlos. And I'm glad to see that it took you a little time, but I'm glad to see that you found one, and along the way did even more great stuff for us. So thank you very much.
Yeah, if I can just, I really do want to thank this community, council members, mayor, staff, everybody. It's been fantastic, 8+ years. And when I took the job, I knew the former superintendent who told me that this is a charmed community, and it really, really is. And a lot of that has to do with your dedication and everything that you all have done. It's been wonderful working with you, and I appreciate all that you do and have done, and the partnership, and I hope the partnership keeps going. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Mark, thank you.
If you guys had kept that up, I thought you were going to take it on the road there or something, and I wasn't sure which one was Martin and which one was Lewis. But Anyway, all right, so the next item is public comment, persons wishing to address the City Council on matters not on the posted agenda. I have one speaker slip. Is Mehran Bashiri? Did I say that right? Okay. If you could keep your comments to about 2 minutes or so, sir, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Dear Mayor Gracilli, dear honorable members of the San Carlos City Council, good evening. My name is Mehran Bashiri, and on behalf of the Baha'i community of San Carlos, I would like to request that the City of San Carlos make a proclamation on the occasion of the bicentennial of the birth of Baha'u'llah, October 22nd, 2017. Baha'u'llah's message of love and respect aimed to make the world a beautiful place that celebrates harmony and peace. He says, the well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. The Baha'i community is active in interfaith engagements and continues to promote understanding, dialogue, and interaction among people of different religions. Neighborhood classes for spiritual training and virtual education are also offered by the Baha'i community in the spirit of service to all. Please join Prime Minister Modi of India, Prime Minister Lung of Singapore, and countless other world leaders to proclaim October 22nd, 2017, the 200th anniversary of the birth of Baha'u'llah. You are all also welcome and invited for the celebrations that are held at 7:30 on Saturday, October 21st. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir, very much. Okay, thank you. Any other folks that want to comment on some items not on the posted agenda? All right, we'll move on. Next item is the consent calendar. Consent items are usually done in one motion. Do I have a motion for the consent, leaving E out?
I move we approve items 7A through 7D.
I second.
All right, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
And Mayor Grisilli?
Stop. Yes. Thank you. All right, the next item is 8A, study session, discussion on strategies and options for increasing child care facilities in San Carlos. Mr. Seve, is that your bailiwick?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. At your January 23rd meeting, the Council received a presentation from San Mateo County on the preschool shortage in the county, and received a petition from some parents in San Carlos urging the Council address the issue of daycare in our community. Council at that time directed our staff to explore strategies to improve some of the options for daycare in San Carlos. Staff then retained a consultant, EPS, to conduct a study on the strategies and options to increase child care facilities. Tonight we have Ashley Cannett of EPS who will deliver the remainder of this presentation. I'll get up toward the end and talk about some of the recommendations and suggestions for your consideration. We also have Economic Development Coordinator Martin Romo and myself here to answer questions this evening. In terms of stakeholder outreach, what we did is once the report was complete, we gave the report to some of the folks that spoke at the meeting on the 23rd and some other people that provide daycare in San Mateo County in this area to get their feedback and to see what their concerns were and to have them take a look at our report. And then we met with folks. Martin and I sat down with some people to discuss their concerns and give us feedback on the report. For instance, we spoke with the residents that got the petition together for daycare, and one of the concerns that they have is simply the difficulty that folks are having finding daycare facilities and spots in San Carlos. We also talked to the operator of a local large family daycare facility in San Carlos in a single family home, and that person went through our minor use permit process to go from a small family daycare to a large family daycare, and it was a very difficult and challenging process for that operator. We talked to staff from the Wonder Years School, a commercial child care facility in San Carlos, and they are always looking for other locations in San Carlos and throughout San Mateo County, and they have a list of about 300 children that they'd like to place, and they've had difficulties for a number of different reasons in finding spaces in San Carlos and in San Mateo County. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the presentation over to Ashley, and then, as I noted, I'll get back up in a few minutes. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ashley Canna. I'm with Economic and Planning Systems. We're a real estate and land use economics consulting firm. And first, a little bit of good news. I found childcare this evening for myself so that I could be here to talk about childcare with all of you, and I'm looking forward to it. I have just a very brief presentation that really follows the order of the memorandum that we had prepared. The idea really here is that I want to cue this up for discussion and questions from you. So in 2016, the San Mateo County Human Services Agency and First Five San Mateo County and the Child Care Partnership Council partnered to prepare an early learning facilities needs assessment for children under the age of 5. And the study was prepared by Breon Economics, and it's publicly available. And the first part of our scope was to review that study. But where we really focused our efforts was in identifying the preliminary options for consideration by this body. And we found that these preliminary options really lent themselves to categorization as either regulatory options or financing tools. But just quickly a review of the needs assessment. In the city of San Carlos, the study, this is the Breon Economic study, found that there's a need for nearly 1,500 licensed care spaces, and found a supply of approximately 855 total spaces. These numbers are comprised of spaces for infants, spaces for preschoolers, but when you take those two numbers and compare them to one another, we found a gap or a shortage of nearly 640 spaces. And it's really important to keep in mind that these numbers reflect a snapshot, just a moment in time. These are current conditions. But if no new supply is added and population grows, the supply will increase. So if, as a matter of policy, this body wants to do something to address the shortage, there are a number of regulatory options that you may have or that you have available to you. And one note just off the bat, there are state licensing requirements, and then there are those regulatory issues that you have some local control over. For example, the state has a number of requirements that are there for the health and safety of children and staff, and you don't have so much control, you cannot manage those requirements. But there are a number of issues that as a local jurisdiction you can control. So, for example, should the city want to begin to address this shortage in San Carlos, there can be language in the general plan or other policy documents explicitly stating that providing or supporting the creation of child care is a city policy objective. The city also sets its own zoning limitations. Currently, child care uses in San Carlos are limited to residential and mixed-use zones, but that could be evaluated further. The city also has quite a bit of control over the permitting process. So, for example, applicants seeking to open a new child care center or facility in the city might find that there are requirements related to parking, noise, or traffic, which serve as a barrier to getting the facility up and running. There are also fees and processing times for permits, which are reported as obstacles because they add time and cost to the process. One really specific example has to do with family home child care facilities. A small family home child care facility serves up to 8 spaces, or serves up to 8 children. That's allowed by right currently in the city. But there are large family home child care facilities that serve up to 14 children. And for these, the city requires a minor use permit, which the state does not require that you require a minor use permit or any sort of discretionary action. Development agreements are another regulatory tool you have at your disposal. You may already be using them for certain types of projects, but a development agreement is a legally binding agreement between a local government and a developer. It's authorized by state statute, and the developer secures entitlements for an agreed-upon period of time, and in exchange, the local government negotiates for infrastructure improvements or other amenities like child care that might not otherwise be obtainable through the normal entitlement process. These are discretionary. They must be adopted by local ordinance. And then moving into some of the financing tools, we've identified a few that we're going to talk about: development impact fees, citywide parcel tax, or other special taxes. And in the case of child care development impact fees, these are one-time charges on new development. They are intended to mitigate the effects of new development, so they are not there to serve or to help you address the existing deficiency or the existing shortage. They're set according to Nexus logic. There has to be a reasonable relationship between the new development and the fee charged and collected. With this revenue, the city could establish a child care facility trust fund or some other sort of account to track these funds, and then the city could spend them in some appropriate way. Development impact fee revenue, of course, can only be used to fund capital projects. It can't go towards the maintenance or operations or subsidy of the use. And again, this is all authorized by state statutes under the Mitigation Fee Act. There are also, citywide parcel or special taxes. These types of taxes do require a 2/3 vote, but in any case, they enhance the general fund revenues and they can be dedicated to specific purposes, such as child care. Sometimes these taxes are bundled, so voters are, with their vote, prioritizing child care and parks and other types of amenities that they're interested in seeing in their city. Parcel taxes have flat rate structures. They're not ad valorem, and they typically sunset, and they do require reauthorization periodically. There are examples of special taxes being used for child care in other cities. West Sacramento, for example, has a sales tax increase that they have approved, and that goes to fund preschool programs. In the city of Los Angeles, they charge 50 cents a pack on cigarettes, but there are also examples of soda taxes to fund preschool programs. And then in the city of San Francisco, they actually set aside a share of local property taxes for preschool programs. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Al, and we're all going to be available for questions.
Thank you, Ashley. So on your screen, what we've done is we've divided up some of the regulatory options into some short-term options that we think could have an impact right away and that we could get to fairly quickly, and again would have a positive impact. And then some other things that we think that will require more study and are perhaps more challenging. And so, for instance, under the short term, we have applications could be expedited, so we could look into moving those forward more quickly. Fees have been cited by some of the smaller organizations and as a real impact for folks. For instance, a minor use permit is about $2,300 and a conditional use permit is about $4,700. And inclusion of child care facilities as a negotiation in development agreements is an option as well. Other things like parking and traffic requirements, expansion of small family to large, and waiving the minor use permit, evaluating other land use regulations, and adding child care to the general plan are doable, but they would take more time and resources to implement, and we would need to come back to you, probably need to ask for some resources to complete those projects. So that concludes our presentation this evening, and we're available to answer any questions of the mayor and council.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Savay. Thank you, Ashley. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Ashley. Thanks, Al, for the presentation. I am really happy that we're looking into this. I think this is a significant issue. I've heard from a lot of residents in San Carlos about it. I myself have a preschooler, and I know we're grateful that we're able to find local preschool, but I know from a lot of other parents that it's been a struggle. The question that I wanted to ask is, what do we think is the biggest impediment for preschoolers or preschools establishing themselves in San Carlos today? I know we went through recently with Montessori looking for Edison Montessori looking for a spot. If we know other ones, but what do you think is the biggest impediment?
I think there's 2 or 3 issues in there. One is for small and large family daycares, or primarily large family daycares on the residential side. And then there's issues on the commercial side where people like the Wonder Years are having difficulty finding lots and properties because the cost of everything is so high now, and the lease rates have gotten so expensive in Silicon Valley that it's extremely difficult for them to find affordable places to go. And on the commercial side, what I'm hearing, and you may hear from some speakers, is regulatory requirements like parking or other planning or building related requirements where they have to put sprinklers in the building and things like that. Some of those can be avoided, but some can, and so it's really the expense and scarcity of land on the commercial side. On the residential side, what we hear is the process itself is very difficult. For instance, one of them took about a year or more to get through because in almost every case there's neighbor concern with regard to these, and it's understandable. So there's a lot that's asked of some of these going from small to large daycare, and a lot of requirements for pickup and drop off and public meetings and fees and things like that. So I think on those 2 sides, those are the key issues.
The last one that we dealt with in San Carlos on the small residential side, was that the one on Drake? Is that right?
I believe so, yes.
And so you put here that getting rid of the minor use permit would require additional study. What kind of additional study do you think it needs? I mean, if you say that, hey, lifting this would help address the problem in the short term, it's a small regulatory change, what kind of study do you think we would need to do?
Maybe not, the word study might not be the best, but maybe recommendations on best practices, because if you look at the other side of the coin, what we hear from the neighbors is they're concerned about people blocking their driveways, about extra traffic, about noise. There are some general best practices that are recommended that cities can do to go ahead and waive that, but then, have some basic requirements in the code. So it's more like assembling the right best practices and bringing them forward to you and the Planning Commission.
All right, great, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Collins.
I'm going to have, if Mark's got questions, I'm still kind of formulating mine. So.
All right, Mr. Olbert.
Nothing like being a pitch hitter, Ron. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Al, and thank you, Ashley. Very good presentation. Number of questions, but I think they're fairly straightforward. We are not unique in the peninsula in having to address this issue, as I recall. What have other communities that may be a little bit further down the pike on reacting to the situation? What have they done?
Some cities have waived the minor use permit, for instance. Some have reduced parking requirements. Others have passed fees. I think in the report it talks about, and Ashley can talk a little more about this, but some cities have, special impact fees. For instance, we have traffic impact fees in our community, and others have daycare fees that are charged and again go into a fund. So I'd like maybe Ashley can touch on a few more that I haven't thought of.
Sure. Thank you for the question. We touched on a few of them, but it's very important to distinguish between the things that cities are doing to address the existing deficiency versus what things that cities are doing to get ahead of future growing demand. On the financing side, impact fees are common.
Excuse me.
Sure.
What I meant actually was, things have specific communities done, like Burlingame did this, or that's what I'm interested in.
Sure. So the city of San Francisco, the city of Berkeley, the city of Santa Monica, among others, I could put together a fuller list, do have impact fees. I listed a few cities, West Sacramento, Los Angeles, San Francisco, that have gone the special tax route, and they're taking general fund revenues and allocating them to child care.
How about the peninsula? I'm sorry, I interrupted. I apologize.
No, I was
How
just
about the peninsula,
right.
where we
San Mateo
live?
County. San Mateo County.
South San Francisco, I know, is in their development agreements with new commercial developers, making sure that there are provisions for child care facilities.
Okay, good. The next question I had is, since we restrict child care facilities, to, as you said, to residential and mixed-use zones, is that because of various state requirements that, like, thou shalt not allow a child care facility in an industrial area, which wouldn't surprise me, but I'm just wondering if there are state rules that we have to comply with?
You know, there has been, for instance, I believe the Montessori used to be at Tierra Linda, and they were looking for a place in San Carlos, and they began to look in our industrial zone for land. And the thing is that the lease rate in the industrial zones is lower than it is, for instance, on El Camino. However, many cities don't allow for daycare to go into industrial zones because of the potential for kids to be near toxic materials and solvents and vapors and things that are used in industrial zones. And your second part of the question, is there any state or other regulations? And the California Environmental Quality Act strongly recommends that cities don't put kids below a certain age or the elderly in the way of these areas. For instance, they are considered, according to CEQA, as sensitive receptors, because if a vapor or other material is released, they're more apt to breathe it in. It's more apt to be detrimental to them faster. And so that's why we don't, and that's why many cities don't allow for daycare facilities in industrial zones, and we don't.
Okay.
And so that's why.
All right. Next question is, as far as specific regulations that we might have relating to parking or noise or traffic involving the residentially sited places, can you briefly summarize do we have any such that restrict the development of these kind of facilities in residential areas?
There may be a separation requirement. Is there, Martin? Okay. All right. So there's no separation. That's what I was asking Martin about. But in terms of what's required for like a large family daycare is there's no specific parking requirement. For instance, it doesn't say for how many kids you need so many parking spaces. What we do say is you need to provide a parking management plan, and you need to provide for pickup and drop-off areas and manage those very well and things like that. So it's sort of, we put it on the onus on the operator to provide us with a plan that we and the neighbors find acceptable. And I say and the neighbors because those require a minor use permit and a public meeting with the zoning administrator.
Okay. Last question is, in terms of, roughly speaking, recently in a typical year, I know you said that a lot of potential applicants don't go through the application process because of various barriers, cost, what have you. But just in general, in terms of inquiries, I mean, because I'm trying to figure out what would be the financial effect if we said, we'll waive the fees. How many do you get approaching us every year?
Well, not that many, quite frankly, in comparison to some other things. I'd say 2 or 3 a year, maybe.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Grocott?
So on number 5 that you have on that list, I'm wondering if there's not a way to cut it down the middle, meaning instead of, it sounds like the small operations almost have to go through no process whatsoever. And then if they get to the large, they have to go through this process. Couldn't you meld the two of those together and say, regardless of size, you have to go through this process? For instance, it seems like you could do something where you give them a conditional use permit of some kind, and then you require that they come in and meet with staff and go over the do's and don'ts of what we expect with operations. And then if anything gets violated, well, your use permit goes away if you have too many violations. Could something like that be formulated?
It's similar to what we have now, because if you have a minor or a conditional use permit, that requires public hearings before either under the minor use permit, it would be the zoning administrator, or the CUP with the planning commission, and you have to pay fees. So it's sort of a barrier to entry. It's a lot of work and time and effort that goes in. That's sort of what you've described, I think, is closer to what we have now. And what I think we're hearing from the providers is, remove that barrier to entry.
Interesting. Because it seems like there needs to be something, there's got to be some kind of policing. Otherwise, as you said, the neighbors are going to get really upset.
That's the big challenge with this one.
That's the big challenge. Okay. And on number 6, when you're talking about evaluating the existing land use regulations, Mark hit on this a little bit. It seems like it's mostly, the big question there is in the industrial zone. On that one, could it be done on a case-by-case basis, where because right now, you look at our industrial zone, which is changing. I mean, you go down to like where the brewery is, and you've got the brewery and you got some other businesses going, the wineries and stuff. I don't really see those being a barrier to having daycare nearby. If you smell wine fermenting, I don't think it's going to hurt anybody. But, so we're sort of losing a lot of that toxic industrial stuff going on, and we have things that are more, easy to live with. And it seems like it could be done on a case-by-case basis. And again, if you have a conditional use permit, it seems like you could review it and say, okay, given the neighborhood right now and the operations that are going on, we can give you this use permit. You can put it in a daycare. However, if some kind of paint company or something gets approved and moves into the neighborhood, it could be a detriment to your operation, and they would just have to know that going in. Is that the state law? Can you do that kind of thing? Do you have that kind of freedom?
You can do that. I think there's a risk for the city to put the sensitive kids in within an area that we know could either have toxics, but not only the toxics. I think you need to look at it also from the business side, because there's even though we're, in some areas like industrial R's, as you mentioned, we're changing into wineries and breweries, there's still people using, fixing cars and working with metal and making loud noises. So the issue is those people have put big investments into their buildings and their businesses, and if a daycare goes next door, then you have an inherent conflict. So it's just something to think about. And I think secondarily, your idea, maybe it would be one area that I look at is like El Camino or some of the other mixed-use areas where we do have a conditional use permit, and maybe reducing that requirement to a minor or eliminating it altogether, so that some of your mixed-use commercial zone does get easier as opposed to putting it in an industrial zone.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very interesting reading over the weekend. Got quite an education. And I also realized that you can do all the planning you want, but now you've got licensing and regulatory issues that sometimes conflict with what you're trying to provide as a city. So my sympathies go out to those people who are trying to create daycare for young children. The question I have, though, a couple of them. Is there any estimate as to what the potential is if we liberalize the requirements for, small and large family daycare? Any idea of, if we liberalize it, how much more that might create in terms of availability?
You know, I don't believe we speculated on that number. We don't have that in our report. We could certainly.
There's a way to evaluate it. I'm just.
Yeah, there may not be, but I think that in talking to people and just knowing the neighborhoods, I think probably the lowest hanging fruit is in the single-family residential areas. Over the years, you know, working for different cities, those have been the most difficult because of the conflicts between the neighbors. But it's also sort of the easiest and to do for folks. You know, you don't have to lease a big building; you already have your house, and so it's a lot easier for folks to swing that one. So I think that might be one that we could tackle, but it would be a challenge. And then. I guess secondarily, it would be the commercial mixed-use zones would be the second sort of lowest hanging fruit, maybe looking at some of the regulations and making it a little easier there. But the lease rates, again, are very expensive in those zones.
Right. Then the other question I had was, do you have an idea how much land is indeed off limits in town here for these kinds of facilities? Do we have an idea?
No, but I would think that, you know, again, if you look at sort of the map, it would be most of the areas on the east side of Old County Road. However, you have the Loreola neighborhood. I don't know of any daycare in that area. Loreola Park, I believe we have something at the Loreola building. So we don't have acreage, or of course we can always gather that information for you, but I would say that, you know, if you look at the land area, single family, and then the mixed use areas are, there's a lot of land there that would potentially allow for this.
Right. I mean, we have different zones. We have light industrial, heavy industrial, industrial arts.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering maybe some of those, you know, lesser heavy industrial use areas might be looked at.
Well, you know, there's the general commercial industrial, or GCI, area that tends to go more toward retail. And I think that if you were going to look at some of the areas on the east side, that's maybe where we would start, is, you know, more in the retail areas where we know that it hasn't historically been used as industrial, and the uses that are already there aren't making loud noises and using solvents and toxic materials. Like in shopping centers or something like that. Maybe that's an area that we could explore first and see if there's some options there. I think there probably are. And we could have, again, we can still look at the industrial side of it, but again, it's, you know, there's some risks, very significant risks there.
Well, my kids were coming along. I can think of a few times where it might have been convenient, though, to have a winery next to the child club.
Yeah.
Just two last questions, and they're kind of related. I noticed that we now have impact fees, development impact fees, but I realized that we can only use those or dedicate those if we're going to do so to new facilities. So would we then carve out, could we say not in a development agreement, but an impact fee, or going to carve out X percent and dedicate that? Or would we ask the developer to do that? How would that work if we were going to incorporate that as part of impact fees?
So the council would establish a particular impact fee for daycare, and you would put it in a fund specifically for the creation or maintenance, I guess, of the daycare facilities. Am I missing something, Ashley?
Not maintenance, only the capital.
Only the capital improvement for daycare. Am I missing anything else on that?
Yeah. Okay. All right. And then the last question, I promise. As far as development agreements, that is apparently meant to address the deficit, right? In other words, where you have impact fees, we're asking the developer to create it.
Yes.
And the development agreement, we're saying, you know, we want money to, you know, we'll go out and find it. And so can we also incorporate that into development agreements?
Yes, you can. And as you mentioned, you can get a developer just to give you money to put into a fund to do daycare elsewhere. Or you can say to the developer, you need to create the daycare within your new office development. And that would benefit people who will be living and working in San Carlos and working at that office development. That would be the best case scenario.
So it sounds like we have lots of options and lots of things to think about.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Olbert, another question?
Yes, just a quick follow-up. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Al, I want to make sure I understand the difference in the city's regulatory process for small and large family-based daycare centers. The small ones are required to be allowed by right.
Yes.
The larger ones can be allowed by right if the city so chooses, but if they are not allowed by right, we are allowed to put some constraints and process. And what constraints are we allowed to put on them? Can you help me understand that? Yeah.
Okay. If they're not, so meaning they do have to go through a discretionary review, we can put, anything that we think is reasonable with regard to parking, noise, how many employees, that kind of thing. So we can regulate it as the city sees fit.
And I think the watchword probably is it has to be reasonable under the overall state guidelines, because if we were trying to impose something unreasonable, we would be exposed to a intervention by the state saying your rules are inappropriate. And okay,
correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. All my questions got answered, so thank you, gentlemen. We have a number of folks that want to speak on this item, so I'll call your name, and if you'd come up, if you could keep your comments to about 2 minutes, that would be terrific. First name I have is David Fleischman. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Gracili, Vice Mayor Grocott, council members, community. I'm David Fleischman. I'm the Executive Director of 4Cs of San Mateo County. I'm a member of the Child Care Planning Council. I have submitted letters on behalf of 4Cs and from the County Superintendent of Schools, so I will be very brief. I want to thank you for taking on this vital issue. I want to commend the staff and EPS for the report and the excellent options that could have significant impact on this growing crisis. To Mr. Albert's question, there's what's happening in 3 communities. The City of San Mateo has made one of its fiscal year priorities for the coming year. Both the City of San Mateo and South San Francisco have specific child care impact fees that they collect. San Mateo has over $1 billion in that fund right now. And Redwood City has eliminated fees associated with establishing daycare and family child care. So it's just 3 communities and some things that they have done. I'd like to reiterate that we are here to help. 4Cs, the Child Care Planning Council, the San Mateo County Office of Education, First 5. We would love to help you in any way that we can, trying to mitigate this issue. And lastly, I'd like to just tell you an abbreviated story of one of 4C's clients, Valerie Higgins, who, with the help of childcare, went back and was able to get her GED, her bachelor's degree, her master's degree, and get gainful employment. And in her own words, this allowed her to go from needing to rely on the support of the public system to being able to contribute to it through her tax dollars. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Sarah Kinahan, is that right? Or did I misspell and say that?
Good, well, yes.
Okay.
Good evening. So I'm Sarah Kinahan. I was part of the duo that presented to this body in January. I was here along with Jean Marie Houston from the County Office of Education. And I'm also a San Carlos resident and a parent of a 4- and 6-year-old and a consumer of childcare and after-school care and preschool in the city. And I'm currently working as a consultant in this area of child care facilities development. And I wanted to bring you a couple of updates since we were here in January. The Silicon Valley Community Foundation had convened a task force to look at this issue and to look at the needs assessment findings. And they issued 4 recommendations, and 2 of them map to the strategies here. One was around working with cities to make it easier for new child care development to be fostered within your jurisdiction. And the other was around generating new revenue to support child care facilities development. So it's nice to see a synergy between that group and the recommendations here. I will just say that reiterate that the needs assessment, they found that the #1 barrier countywide, and I think this relates to the situation here in San Carlos, is the difficulty finding a site. So focusing in, if you have to prioritize these different strategies, focusing on those that would help remove that barrier. So it's great to hear the discussion about where can childcare be sited. I would re-emphasize the fact that the small family child care is allowed by right, so you can't put any restrictions on that. But making it easier to expand to large would be a great way to chip away at that gap. And then lastly, I will sum up by saying we have a new initiative starting up in the county called Build Up for San Mateo County's Children. It's many of the partner agencies that facilitated that needs assessment and participated in the task force. I'll be very brief.
No, that's all right, sorry.
It's okay.
I don't really know how to do this, so I'm just going to just keep hitting the buttons. So maybe somebody could come over. Go ahead, finish, sorry.
So Build Up is looking at convening a seminar, a really interactive seminar for cities on the peninsula to come together. We're planning it for early 2018 to have city staff and city council members come together and put their thinking caps on and learn from each other, because we do have examples from throughout the peninsula. Redwood City has had childcare required as part of the new Bradford Street development, so that was a required element in that development. And in San Mateo, they recently required the developer at Hillsdale Terraces to provide additional funds to their childcare facilities fund, $100,000. So we have lots of examples, and we're here to help.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm advised I now have fixed the problem, so. But I wouldn't bet on it. Jessica Mahaly? I'm not sure if I got that one right. 3 for 3, yeah.
Good evening. Thank you, council members and mayor. I'm Jessica Mahaly. I'm also a resident in San Carlos and have worked with my colleagues here in the early childhood field for a long time. And I want to thank you for looking at this issue, and also mention that with the Build Up event that Sarah mentioned in early 2018, we are going to provide opportunities for cities to work together with their colleagues around the peninsula, as well as school districts and major employers, to look at collaboration efforts and possibilities. So we really encourage you to come to that. I think my colleagues here have covered everything that I was going to say, so I will just say thank you so much for looking at this issue.
All right, thank you for your comments. Serena Lowe, is it Lowe? Okay. I know.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council members. Thank you for the great report and presentation by EPS. My name is Serena Lowe, and I was one of the parents that came in to present the petition back in January. We're really thankful for this opportunity to be part of the partnership and, expand this discussion further. I think we all can appreciate the importance of preschool and early child care facilities for our children, for the future of San Carlos as well. I just want to reiterate, I love the fact that you had the short-term and long-term breakout, because we were kind of thinking the same thing. But just to reiterate the sense of urgency around this topic, that, there are, of course, in the next, I think the Breon report was looking at like 5 years out, but there's parents currently right now who are struggling with this issue. And so, to prioritize the short-term goals, or, whatever the zoning considerations may be to expedite the process a little bit. Some of the additional thoughts that we had was grant funding as well, I think was brought up during the meeting with Martin earlier this month, I think, or last month. And then also just reviewing and revising potentially the current San Carlos use of the land that they have and anything else that is around. For example, the Loyola Park is an example of how that land is being used for a preschool part-time. You know, perhaps there's other space in the city of San Carlos similar to that. I guess I just to close up, I had one question, was what the impact fees and the taxes for child care facilities, how would that be utilized and accessed? You know, just to understand that further. It sounds great, but, you know, just the mechanics.
Could you speak to us?
Yeah,
Okay, thank
the
you.
mechanics of that.
Okay, we'll find out for you. We'll get you the answer.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Al, you want to come up and answer that question, please? Or Ashley? Or both?
Yeah, well, as noted, I think there are some restrictions on how the fees can be used, and we heard earlier, I believe that it would have to be used for capital improvements and maintenance. Is that correct?
No,
Not maintenance. I keep saying maintenance.
So it seems some communities will set up a trust fund. So impact fee revenue will be collected in the trust fund, and then it's a matter of city policy and priority about how those funds can be expended. But they have to be spent on developing the capital facilities. And they have to be. They are building new new facilities in order to address future demand, the demand associated with new development. Through a development agreement, you can address the existing deficiency. You could negotiate for funds for the operations or maintenance. You could subsidize operations. You have a lot more flexibility with the revenue that might come through a development agreement. You can even have a development agreement. You can negotiate for the provision of space.
So to be clear, the impact fees, you said for capital improvements. I get that part. Just for new or to like improve one that's already built?
It's a little bit of a fine line. You could expand. If you're increasing capacity, you can make a case that that's addressing new.
Just trying to identify that. Okay, thank you. Hopefully that answered your question. Okay. If not, they're here. Lorea Martinez?
Good evening, Mayor Gracilli, council members. My name is Lorea Martinez. I'm the other parent who organized the petition with Serena Law. We were here in January. We're excited that we are here again to speak on behalf of the families that need childcare in San Carlos. I just want to bring a data point that I haven't seen in the report, and is that we would need 45 large family daycares in order to meet the supply. And I bring that number because although I'm really excited to hear that we can change that permit and make it easier for family daycare providers to have, instead of 8 children, have 14, so there's only an increase of 4, we would need 45 family daycares in order to meet the supply. So I think that we need to be thinking about having multiple strategies working at the same time, and the need of facilities for commercial daycares is clear to me. Something else that I want to add, and if I may, for Ashley, add a suggestion to the report, and that is on the administrative or maybe logistics side, and is to have a person here in the city hall that is a person of contact for anything related to childcare facilities. As you have known going through the process, there's a lot that we need to learn about regulations, requirements, things that need to get done. And one of the blogs that we heard when Serena and I were going through this process is that sometimes childcare providers are told one thing by the city marshal, then they go through the planning committee and they are told something different or in addition, and that makes the process very painful when it comes to time but also money. So we also want to suggest that there's someone here that can be the person of contact that is educated in all the different pieces of the puzzle of what it means to fill the gap that we have for childcare spots, and that person can follow and be an advocate for those childcare providers here with all the regulations that they have to go through. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And the last speaker card I have is Pranita Balbak.
Council members and Mayor. My name is Pranita Balbak, and thank you for addressing something that's near and dear to my heart. I own a family daycare, and I was the one on Drake Court, and I went through the minor use process. And I think you know the steps we had to go through that, so I'm not going to go through that. But I just want to talk about how emotionally draining it was for me and for the neighbors also. We had to invite the neighbors to our house, and I had about 30 neighbors yelling at me in my living room, telling me that we would not get this permit and they were going to stop us. So after that, I took a step back and we went through the process, and we still went through the pain of trying to manage a household and with young children and dealing with the neighbors next door to us and other things like that. So it cost us money and time, but also emotionally it was draining. And it was a process that in many cities you don't have to go through. You can just go up to the counter and get that permit. I mean, the neighbors aren't going to come inside my house and say, oh, you have 14 children. But the state does license us, and they can come in and say, oh, you have 14 children, you're okay. Or you have 8 children, you're okay. The state licenses you based on your credentials and your education. And that's something the city really doesn't credential you on. So emotionally, it was a hard decision for us to make as a family. And do we move or do we stay? And we decided to stay. And now it's gotten better as new families move into the neighborhood. But we live in a cul-de-sac. And we still have neighbors who park their cars vertically so that our parents can't make a turnaround on the cul-de-sac, on top of the cul-de-sac. And we still have neighbors that, if one of the conditions of our minor use permit is to notify them if we have an event during school hours. So we have to notify our neighbors when we have an event, and we still have neighbors that complain to the city if a car is parked an inch on their driveway. So to avoid that, we have events after hours. Also, we have a parking situation that the city installed that only 4 cars are allowed on the cul-de-sac at one time, which we monitor one, 2. So we actually had to hire another staff person to do that, to be in compliance with the city, with the state. So we have 1 person on the driveway who picks up the children and brings them in, and then 2 inside who manages the children once they're inside the school. So we had to, because of the 4 cars on the driveway, we had to hire another staff person. So I was a lucky guinea pig, and I hope nobody has to go through the right process that we had to. But I got to know all of you, and I got to know a lot of people in our neighborhood, which was nice.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Okay, are there anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Okay. Gentlemen, it's your pleasure.
Mr. Mayor, I presume what we're doing here is at this point sort of giving guidance and direction to staff. Mm-hmm. Well, I'll just start off by saying that from my perspective, I would be perfectly fine, based on what Al told us, waiving the fees. We can always revisit that if it turns out we have way too many applications coming in. But it doesn't sound like there's a large number of them, and it sounds like there's very significant demand, and it's a big issue for the applicants. The other thing that I would very much like to see, if there's any way for us to do this, is if there's a way to put together kind of a, I don't know whether you call it a template or kind of best practices for a large family arrangement, and say, okay, if you're applying for something and you fit these criteria and you agree to be bound by them, then you get it. I guess it wouldn't be as a matter of right, but you sort of get it automatically, okay, that there is no further review process. Just to try and simplify the process that folks have been through. I also think that I think we need to, this may be a little bit longer term review process for staff to come back with some recommendations to us on. I really think we need to be thinking about this every time we have a major development project going on, and we probably ought to be looking at whether or not we ought to follow in the footsteps of some of our neighboring communities and have a child care impact fee of some kind, or as Al pointed out, that it could be done in kind if a developer did it on site. That's not going to address everything. I take to heart the comment that somebody made about how we need 45 large residential places to actually fill the demand that's there, but we can at least take some steps in that direction and sort of keep it in front of us when we're going to look at major new developments and commercial expansions going on in San Carlos. So that's just kind of my guidance. I'd like to see us make this as streamlined as we can you follow the rules that are reasonable and you're there.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Johnson?
I don't see anything on this list that I would be opposed to at this point. I think this is an important issue that's a significant problem for a lot of families. So on the short-term things, I think we should move forward as quickly as possible. I would like to see us have the discussion about getting rid of the minor use permit requirement as quickly as possible. I'm not shy about going there, and I think it's an important thing to do. So,
okay, Mr. Grocott.
I definitely think with future development that goes on in San Carlos, there should be, like Mark said, either a fee that goes into a bank account of sorts, or if the other option is to build within whatever the development is. I agree with Cameron that most of what's on this list I think needs to be looked at. The only thing that I'm a little reluctant on, but I think city staff could come up with something to solve the problem is I wouldn't, I appreciate what you came in and told us about your application process with the 14 and so forth. However, there does have to be some respect and concern for neighbors, as you alluded to, even though it's a rough process. To me, I look at it, it's similar to expanding your house, doing an addition on your home. If it's small, then you can go through an administrative process that's pretty simple. But if you're doing a big major remodel, well, that's going to impact the neighborhood, and people are going to want to have some say on that. But I think you could strike it down the middle a little bit where, we could develop our own numbers. Once you get beyond what the state says is by right, then there's a big jump there, it seems like, from 8 to 14, right? So you could cut something in the middle and say, if you're, 10 or 11 or something, if you're a little bit over the 8, then you go through this process. It's just a staff level review, but there's some fees and, neighborhood notification or whatever. And maybe just like on planning issues, there's the 2-week or, to remove a tree, you've got to, staff might say, yeah, it's okay to remove this oak tree on your property, but there's a 2-week appeal period. So you put some safety measures in there. And then if it gets to 14, I still think the experience that this lady went through tells us it's too arduous and too painful. But you could have, again, I'll use the building industry as a similarity, where you have design guidelines. And you say, these are the design guidelines we're looking for with daycare centers that are going to be up to 14 children. And if you meet these things, that's going to really simplify your application process and make it more streamlined. If you don't, then we've got some issues that we have to work through. So,
all right, thank you. Mr. Collins?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I recall a meeting with, and I don't know if I met with any of you, but I did meet with some advocates many, many months ago, and it was, say the least, frustrating to hear what the needs were and feeling like I didn't think there was really a whole lot we could do about it, so I'm really glad we had the discussion. I'm not going to belabor everything, everybody said, because I pretty much want to echo those comments. I agree we need to streamline the process. I think we ought to look for the best locations for future development. I think that's a great idea. I like the fact that, and I believe that we probably should make childcare part of one of our goals. I don't know if we need to change the general plan. Maybe it's already there. I did not read that over the weekend. But, pardon me, not there? Well, maybe, maybe when we have an amendment to the general plan, we got to take a look at that. I like the idea of a child care development impact fee. I don't like the idea of any special taxes because that involves more elections. And we don't do very well with special tax elections in this town. So, but those are my comments, and I hope we make some great progress here.
Okay, thank you. I would echo most of my colleagues' comments. I think the short-term items can be set up. I'm not a big fan of fees. If you want to waive the fees, that's fine with me. I think relative to the parking, though, it depends on what street you're on. You're on Crestview Drive, where I am, you're not going to have a problem because there's 3 cars, there's 3 spaces in front of my house, and every house. On a cul-de-sac, you got issues. So I think it depends on the location. It's just unfortunate, but you're more constrained. I'm sure you basically probably have 1 space, if that, in the other. But whatever it is, I'm just saying location is important in my mind. I don't think it needs to be from 8 to 14 needs to go to a big step, but I think there needs to be something. Somebody needs to look at it, whether it's the traffic or the parking or whatever. I agree with Mr. Collins. I think taxes are a non-starter. But I would go for the impact fees, and I would also go for the development agreement that if we look at it, depending on how large the process is, then maybe folks have to, if they put 200,000 square foot office building in, they've got to provide child care of some sort. So I think we can do that and not eliminate all the bureaucracy of government, but streamline it so that a lot of folks can do it. As the young lady said, about 45 different places. If we eliminated everything tomorrow, I'm not sure you'd have 45 folks step up and do it. But that's a start. But I think, and also not so much the industrial, but I think on the retail, the mixed use, I think that's also an option. I really think that's a good one. So does staff need any more ideas from us? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate everybody's comments. It's all good stuff. Thank you. All right, our next item is a public hearing, 9A, consideration of adopting a resolution adopting a mitigated negative declaration for the San Carlos Avenue tree removal project and introducing an ordinance amending San Carlos zoning ordinance section 18.41.020, removing founders trees from the definition of protected trees. Mr. Civey.
Good evening once again, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. City Council established a capital improvement project for San Carlos Avenue Pathway and eucalyptus tree removal project. And back in late January, the council added $300,000 to the capital improvement project, bringing the total up to about $500,000, and also suggested that all the eucalyptus trees along San Carlos should be included for consideration of removal because of safety concerns. Staff also authorized staff to proceed to evaluate the trees and amend the zoning code to remove the protected status of those trees along San Carlos Avenue. And in terms of tonight's presentation, I'm going to share this presentation with Lisa Costa-Sanders, our principal planner. And we have a number of other individuals that are here this evening, including myself, to answer questions. We have Jay Walter, our public works director. We have our environmental consultants, Teresa Wallace and John Cunha from LSA. We have Kevin Keelty, our consulting arborist on the project, and Laura Jones, our historical consultant. And so with that, I'm going to have Lisa come up and conclude the presentation, then we'll be available to answer any questions.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Lisa.
The eucalyptus trees were planted on both sides of San Carlos Avenue in the late 1800s. The roadway was widened in 1910, which eliminated the eucalyptus trees on the north side of the street. All of the eucalyptus trees near downtown were removed in the 1920s when the new sidewalks were constructed. The city's 1991 historical resource inventory mentions the planting of the eucalyptus trees into the brief history section of the San Carlos, but does not attribute historical status to the trees. The eucalyptus trees are the responsibility of the adjacent private property owners to maintain, and over the years, many eucalyptus trees along San Carlos Avenue have either been removed by the private property owners or have failed. Since 2005, 20 eucalyptus trees have either failed or have been removed. It is estimated that there are 30 trees remaining from the original planting. In January of early this year, a large eucalyptus tree adjacent to the Arundel Elementary parking lot fell down, completely blocking traffic on San Carlos Avenue. As I indicated, trees are the responsibility of the private property owners to maintain. San Carlos Municipal Code does require a permit to remove a protected tree. The Community Development Director is required to make certain findings in order to grant a tree removal permit. And then the Founders Tree designation was added in 2009 with the zoning code update to protect eucalyptus trees along San Carlos Avenue. Other eucalyptus trees, as well as acacia, Monterey pine, and fruit trees, are not protected and can be removed without a permit. The ordinance that you have before you, recommended by the Planning Commission, removes all reference to founder trees from the code, so those trees would be able to be removed by right without any permit review process. Also removes the reference to a group of trees from the protected status of eucalyptus trees, and removes the species to allow all eucalyptus trees to remove without a permit. In accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act, LSA conducted the environmental analysis and concluded that the project would not result in any significant environmental impacts. The negative declaration was available for the 21 public review and comment period. And included in that analysis was an arborist report that evaluated all of the eucalyptus trees along San Carlos Avenue. These trees are located very near the roadway. The trees are mature and in need of removal or heavy trimming. The report identified trees with a hazard rating ranging from a low rating of 3 with a low chance of failure to a high rating of 12, considered high probability for damage and or injury. The arborist further identified 4 trees as being priority 1 trees, describing those as being urgent and work should be completed immediately. And then the remaining trees have been identified as priority 2, meaning that they are significant and that work should be completed during the second pruning cycle. And the 4 trees identified as priority 1 have already been removed. Excuse me. And then as indicated, we had a historical evaluation prepared by Dr. Laura Jones. To be eligible for listing in the California Register, she determined that the trees need to be largely continuous, be located on both sides of the avenue, display consistent size, and frame the view of the railroad depot. As indicated, the original tree planting was on both sides, starting at El Camino. The trees are no longer regular in size, spacing, and rarely occur on both sides of the roadway at any location. The trees no longer display the character-defining features it once had and lack sufficient integrity to be qualified as a historic resource. And as I indicated, the initial study mitigated negative declaration was available for public review and comment, and we received 11 comments. Those included objection to removal of the trees, suggestions to consider selective removal, as well as trimming and topping, comments that the trees should be considered as a historic resource, and we also received letters of support for the tree removal. LSA prepared a response to comments, and the commenters did not raise any new issue or provide any new evidence that would warrant additional CEQA analysis. Next steps, if the ordinance is adopted, staff will prepare plans and specifications and solicit bids for the tree removal work. That contract for the tree removal work would require City Council authorization before the work was to occur. Staff will also retain a consultant to work on a tree planting plan in conjunction with the pedestrian safety improvement plan for San Carlos Avenue. And the Planning Commission does recommend that the City Council adopt the resolution approving the mitigated negative declaration and introduce the ordinance to amend San Carlos zoning code to remove the designation of founder trees. I'd be happy to try to answer any of your questions.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Mr. Olbert?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Al. a number of questions. Let me just sort of go through them quickly. In conversations I've had, I'm sure others have had as well, with individuals in the community who came forward about this, there was a concern registered by some about the potential for, I guess I'll call it a conflict of interest between the arborist assessing the trees and then being able to bid on removing the trees. And so I'd like you to comment on that, or whether perhaps this arborist doesn't even do removal. So
That's correct. We specifically chose an arborist that is solely an arborist and is not also associated with a tree removal company.
Okay, good. Thank you. As I recall from conversations that you and I have had, there are various techniques that are used for assessing the health of individual trees, but my recollection is that they all suffer from not being terribly accurate, or rather there's a lot of false negatives and false positives. I was wondering if you could comment on that a little bit, because it sort of gets to the notion of, can we identify a tree that actually is going to come down soon?
Sure. So there's definitely, and I can have Kevin Kilty expand on this, the arborist that we utilized. But there's definitely items that the arborist can see. They can see, when there's some visible rot, when there's some limb issues. There's some things they can do to try to assess the roots to see if there's any infestation of, say, beetles or other, predators in there that are harming the tree. But then there's a lot of times where the tree looks perfectly healthy and beneath the ground the roots have shrunken and then they fall down. So a lot of those items are very hard to predict. I also talked to and communicated with Bob Diska from the city of Burlingame, who has a lot of experience dealing with the eucalyptus trees. And side by side, he's had multiple arborists take a look at those trees, and one that looked perfectly healthy came down, and so they were having some struggles doing that. So they're trying very hard to maintain those trees. They've also tried to investigate in some more scientific methods to try to investigate it, but those seem to have very limited success as well.
Was Burlingame the city that tried to use the ground penetrating radar to assess the roots, or was that a different group?
Correct. Burlingame did try to use the ground penetrating radar. They were able to find the roots, but they weren't able to determine the size of the roots or how healthy what the condition was. And then Caltrans was the organization that tried the tomography to locate where there was rot in the trunk. And I guess it had some success if you happened to find it. But if the rot was up there and you weren't looking up there, then that didn't help you much.
Okay. Do you happen to know just approximately from the original cohort of trees that were put up a century ago, I guess, when the first one failed? I mean, did they sort of all live for decades? And I'm talking about fail, not somebody removing it.
Yeah, I don't have that information.
Okay. My sense is, from what I've talked to other people, they were there for quite a while before they started failing. Okay, Ron's shaking his head too, and Ron's Mr. San Carlos, so he would know that. Just a couple more here. One, and I don't know why I didn't think of this when we were having our pre-meeting discussions. The Founders Tree designation added in 2009. What can staff, or perhaps the members of the council who were on there in 2009, I'd be interested in knowing what the motivation was, the sort of interest was of putting the Founders designation on the trees.
I think there was interest from a historical perspective to save those trees.
And there hadn't been enough experience at that point of trees coming down?
The trees, I don't know about that point, but the trees were previously protected based on size alone and weren't separately called out by size and species. So at the time the ordinance was changed to call them out by size and species, there was not the interest in protecting all eucalyptus trees, but there was some interest in members of the community of at least protecting those on San Carlos Avenue, and that's why it was added.
Okay, I appreciate that. Almost sounds to me like if the discussion had also encompassed the, let me call it, the inherent risk of eucalyptus trees, that was not a big factor.
I don't believe that was done at the same time. Correct.
I don't know if,
I wasn't able
Bob
to find
or
him.
Matt want to comment on that. I know we don't normally ask questions of each other, but
I think what Lisa said, I think basically, as I remember it, and maybe, that's a long time ago, that we had heritage trees, and we wanted to discern these trees as a different breed, so to speak, and make them a little bit more special. I think that was basically it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's it.
All right. Mr. Collins. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I only have really one question. I thought I had read it, but maybe I just didn't see it in there. We're talking about the assumption for a moment that if the Founders Tree designation is removed and the trees that are in question are removed, how does the process work for planning for replacement trees? I'm sure you come back to us at a later time, but is there a public input process for the kinds of trees and the placement of the trees, and the location and all that?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Jay Walter, Public Works Director. Councilmember Collins, yes, that's how it would work. At this moment in time, if council was to approve the removal of the designation and direct me to go forward with a contract to hire someone to remove the trees, we have to determine the location of each one. We have to figure out, in accordance with the planning that we've done for the San Carlos Avenue traffic safety plan that we've outlined for you, where along the sides of the street we would have the ability to plant trees. We would need to talk to the property owners because we would likely have to plant many of those trees on private property. We would want to come up with the right species of tree so that wouldn't cause problems in the future. So we would be hiring a specialist to come in and help us do that and then lay that plan out and have, I'm sure, several meetings from a community standpoint with the council as well as with the affected property owners for removal of the trees and then the selection of trees to be replanted.
Okay, so it's rather involved, and it sounds like it's also dependent on street improvement, safety improvement for sidewalks and that sort of thing.
Well,
or it's integrated, is that right?
That's a very good term, integrated, because I believe that if the council was to decide that they wanted to install sidewalks on some portion of that street, we'd need to make sure that we didn't have a tree planting plan that was in conflict with that improvement. So we'd want to make sure that we carefully planned that out and then place trees so they wouldn't have to be removed and, say, replanted again.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson? Okay, Mr. Olbert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one other follow-up question I just want to make sure that I'm clear on. So the actions before us tonight are to accept the mitigated negative deck and to change the ordinance defining what is a founder's tree, and a founder's tree designation is going to be going away. Are we also, it wasn't clear to me if we are also taking a step to say we are allocating money to take down these trees.
You have already allocated some money. There's, I believe, $500,000 in that CIP budget that does include. It was increased at your January meeting to address some of the tree removal. So what the next step would be, if you were to approve tonight, that sends a signal that you would like some of those trees removed. So Jay's going to work on the bid and the documents and come back to City Council. And at that time, you would then have the option of, yes, remove all the trees, do selective tree removal. I think that would be the appropriate time to have the conversation on, depending on the cost also. Obviously, there's a budget concern, and we can look at the different priority of trees. Some are higher priority from removal than others.
Thank you. Then I actually, unfortunately, have one other follow-up question, which actually is for Mr. Rubens, or perhaps for Jeff. I have historically on this topic been confused about, until just recently, about what proportion of these trees are on public right-of-way versus private property. And there's many aspects to that, but in the one I'm focusing on right now is the allocation of public monies to remove trees that are on private property, which I understand the public health and safety argument. I guess what I'm also wondering is, does that not set a precedent that we sort of are saying we should be spending public money on a lot of other public health and safety things that happen to be on private property? There doesn't seem to be in this plan any role for saying, hey, some of the costs should be borne by the property owner because they have the trees.
I think we've talked about this issue, kind of touched on it, and I think the issue of is, can we identify a cogent public purpose based upon the information in the record? And I think it's going to be a case-by-case situation. When you get the plan for removal of the trees. Trees on private property, the city can't just remove them without the permission of the private property owner, so there'll be some sort of an agreement that we will have with them if that happens. And then we can, with the policy direction from the council, we can address that element of it either at the time we're reviewing the plan or at a future date, and it just depends on the direction that you'd like to go with. The public right-of-way trees might be one category of trees, and we certainly have the ability to contract for those directly. And then the second element might be, well, what kind of a program are we going to have, if we're going to have a program, for trees that happen to be located on private property. And I might be wrong, but there's another criteria that might be different, is the trees on private property might not actually be founders trees. They might be eligible to be removed right now without any sort of ordinance change.
Mr. Grocott, questions?
Yes. So just, Greg, following on that, then I'm a little confused, but between the private and public. However, to Mark's question about spending public money, and I understand not wanting to set a precedence of that kind of thing necessarily, but in the case of trees that are founder trees but happen to be on private property, couldn't there be an argument that, it's on private property, but obviously that person who owns the property didn't plant the tree. It has a historical background.
Yeah, and I think the founders trees are the ones that we've studied more intensively about the danger. So, I mean, that would be the basis for also for a removal. But it's not just that they didn't plant the tree. I think it's a combination of factors you'll be looking at.
Okay. I just have two questions specific to these trees on San Carlos Avenue. Do we have an idea of the average height of these trees? And second question is the specific species of eucalyptus that these trees are.
I'll have the arborist respond to that.
Thank you.
Yes, these are Tasmanian blue gums, which is Eucalyptus globulus, and in the report, they're all identified as Eucalyptus globulus. And in the report, we do have a height and a spread column, and some of the trees reach up to 100 feet tall, and then some of the smaller ones are in the 40s and 50s. Usually, the 40s and 50s, a lot of them were trees that the property owner had topped or done some heavy trimming to and brought the height down. And then, so that's it. But every tree was estimated in their height. We used a clinometer to measure the heights just to get a baseline, and then from there we used a just estimated height. Okay. But somewhere around 100 feet would be the tallest of the trees.
Okay, thank you.
So just one other question, Mr. Rubens. You said that if it's on private property, we need the property owner's permission to take it down. So what if it's really a bad tree and we think it's going to fall over tomorrow? Then I guess there's some legal remedy we go to sort of cajole or convince that it needs to come down.
With evidence, we could declare a tree a public nuisance, and then take action.
So there is an option?
Yes.
Okay, all right. This is a public hearing. We have a number of speakers, so I'll start calling some names. If folks could keep their comments to around 2 minutes, that would be terrific. The first name I have here is Ken Castle.
Good evening, Mayor and council members.
Obviously, this is a difficult issue, and I lived for 18 years in Burlingame. That's a good city to look to ask people about how they manage that problem. I was a resident when Caltrans proposed to eliminate the entire 2-mile-long canopy of eucalyptus trees along El Camino. That created almost a revolution within the city, and the city council basically negotiated with Caltrans not to do that, and to come up with a plan to maintain those trees, to trim them, to identify trees that needed to be removed, and apply some level of reasonableness to what was a historic grove of trees. In 2012, that entire grove was placed on the National Register of Historic Places. The trees are doing fine. There aren't a lot of issues with them falling. The key here is maintaining the trees, getting consistency in maintenance. While their arborists will argue that eucalyptus trees are more prone to failure than others, bear in mind that we had a very wet winter. We had a lot of trees and a lot of different species that came down on highways. There were pine trees, there were oak trees, all kinds of trees that fell with this historic wet winter that we had. So it's hard to predict exactly what tree is going to fall. Where do you draw the line? So if you say with eucalyptus, we think they're more dangerous, we're going to get rid of them all. Some cities have done that in this state. Other cities have a protection to keep them in place and maintain them properly, have the homeowners maintain them, the ones that own them. And so there are ways to look at this to salvage the trees that are in good shape. I would say that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, get rid of the whole grove, simply because some people are concerned about it. If the trees are diseased and show problems and can be verified by more than one arborist, that's critical, more than one arborist, then I would say move in that direction. If you're going to tweak the zoning ordinance, please revisit the other tree issues that are in that ordinance right now. One of them allows redwood trees of 72 inches or less in diameter to be removed. This is unbelievable. There's no other city in the peninsula that allows redwood trees of 72 inches to be removed. The codes are 38 inches in Redwood City and 48 inches in Burlingame. Let's fix the whole tree ordinance. Let's revisit what you guys started to talk about in January and look at the rest of the tree issues that should be updated and not just focus on eucalyptus trees. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Jackie Villard. Okay, that's fine. And you are, ma'am?
Oh, my name is Laverne Vitale.
Okay, thank you, Laverne. Go ahead.
I live under the same tree. It's not our tree, it's a neighbor's, but we've spent over $5,000 to have it go straight up, just to trim our part of the yard. For the people, I've heard so many people say, oh, we love to look at them, they're beautiful, but do you live in the danger zone of that tree? She's our neighbor.
Okay, just one at a time. Just speak into the mic, ma'am, please. Thank you.
So that is, and the main thing is, are you in the danger zone? And another thing, we have pictures of what the 70 turkey vultures that live in the trees. And I'd like to pass these on to you. And the fire danger right now from those trees, and no one seems to clean up underneath them. Our house would be gone in a minute if somebody drops and you know what's happened lately. So the children and other people run and walk through all the droppings on the street. We can smell it in our backyard from the turkey vultures. And there's a lot of disease with turkey vultures. So I just ask people that love them to realize on a winter night, I never know whether it's going to come, it would destroy our house. And you can just, and during the day, today I was out in the backyard for 1 hour and 5 different limbs fell. So, they are nice, but you never know when they're going to fall. And most of the time, they're shallow roots, and they fall during the heat, during the summer. So may I pass these?
Absolutely. Just give it to the clerk or to somebody. That's fine. Thank you.
Would you like to come and spend the afternoon and sit under one of the trees?
Thank you. Just, ma'am, thank you. If you'd like to speak, you can. You can come right on up. Okay? Did you fill out a form? I did. You can do it later. You can fill out a form later, just for the record. Not a problem. Come on up, please. Come on up.
I lived there for 25 years. We had 2 cars destroyed. We had our roof destroyed. We had the thing destroyed. It's in the sidewalk. It goes over San Carlos Avenue. Just come and see. If you like those type of trees, take responsibility, take liability. I lived there for 25 years. I'm scared to death that the kid's going to walk and something's going to come down on them, because it came several times, and we were very, very lucky it didn't hit a person. All those trees up on San Carlos Avenue are dangerous, really. I'm sick and tired of hearing something's going to be done. Nothing has been done. 25 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for your comments. If you
I
fill out
can
a
send you pictures. I have pictures of the damages.
Okay.
I can send you.
If you'd fill out a form later so the clerk could have it. Thank you so much. All right. Jacqueline Knapp.
Good evening. I'm so thankful the City Council is taking up the matter of revisiting the San Carlos founder tree policy at this meeting. I understand that if you remove the founder tree designation from the eucalyptus trees along San Carlos Avenue, which is where I live, it'll be easier for property owners to apply to have the trees removed. Unfortunately, it's very expensive to remove a mature eucalyptus tree, and as a low-income senior citizen receiving free food from the caring cupboard of San Carlos, I cannot afford to remove the 4 trees on my property. I cannot even afford the $3,000 required to prune them every 3 years. Those who are opposed to the removal of these dangerous trees probably don't live with 80-foot tall eucalyptus trees on their property with the accompanied public danger and liability they can cause. I understand that as part of your discussion, the City Council will be considering whether or not to use public funds to remove the trees that are currently designated founders trees. These eucalyptus trees are not indigenous to this area and should never have been planted here in the first place. They become more dangerous as they mature, and even more so if they're not properly maintained over the years. The City of Burlingame, along with the State of California, has maintained their eucalyptus trees, and the Los Altos Fire Department has a fund to pay for the removal of any mature eucalyptus tree if the owner chooses to do so. That is because eucalyptus trees are such a fire hazard. Someone set one of mine on fire a few years ago by reaching over my back fence on San Carlos Avenue at 11 o'clock at night. If we had been asleep, we'd probably have gotten killed, but we were awake and were able to get the fire department. You just have to walk outside and breathe the air tonight to be reminded of the tremendous damage fires can cause. The City of San Carlos has not maintained the eucalyptus trees on San Carlos Avenue. They have put that burden on the property owner. Many of these trees have not been maintained due to the high cost of pruning them or the property owner's lack of knowledge concerning how dangerous they can be. I was just given a quote of $3,000 to prune them again. My certified arborist pointed out that pruning them does not prevent them from dropping heavy branches which could kill someone or one of them falling over completely. I was told that dropping branches is the nature of mature eucalyptus trees, and on a busy corner like the one where I live, it is definitely a public safety issue. Since your last City Council meeting, Kevin Kilty, the consulting arborist hired by the City of San Carlos to assess the eucalyptus trees, phoned me for an appointment to actually come into my backyard. He came to take a closer look at my trees and to verify that I have 4 eucalyptus trees as I claimed. He happened to be there when the schools let out and saw firsthand the amount of traffic that is there for an hour or so 2 or 3 times a day. Mr. Kilty told me that he had not realized that when he rated their degree of danger in his initial report that there was so much foot and vehicle traffic behind my house, directly behind the location of my eucalyptus trees. He agreed that the condition location of my trees creates a definite public safety issue. He said that my trees should be moved up his list as the degree of danger of the eucalyptus trees on San Carlos Avenue. As part of the numerical rating system that arborists use, the location and danger that is affected. It's not just if they're diseased or, they can't tell how low the risk.
Could you sort of wrap it up, Ms. Neff?
I will.
Thank you.
Again, I want to point out that removing a mature eucalyptus tree is very expensive. The high cost might cause property owners not to remove a tree which ought to be removed, thereby raising public safety issues. This especially applies to senior citizens like myself. Thank you for listening to my concerns.
Okay, thank you for your comments. The next speaker card I have is Tom Haxton.
Thank you, Mayor and council members, for opening to public comments. My family and I moved to San Carlos largely because of the city's trees. I run up San Carlos Avenue about once a week on my favorite running route through San Carlos, and I love the scenery and shade provided by the 130-year-old eucalyptus trees. I'm sure that many generations of San Carlos residents will run, bike, or drive along San Carlos Avenue over the next 130 years, and I want to make sure that we make an informed, thoughtful decision before removing any more of these mature trees. In my time, I want to make 3 points. First, the average tree isn't dangerous. Second, the average eucalyptus tree isn't any more dangerous than any other tree. Third, the city already has a mechanism for removing unsafe individual trees. The argument to find all these trees as unsafe is based on a preliminary inspection technique that has proven to be wildly inconsistent and should not be confused with a comprehensive hazard inspection. The average tree is very safe. On average, falling trees cause 34 deaths per year in the United States. That's fewer than the number of deaths from lightning and 1,000 times less than the number from car accidents. The average eucalyptus tree is no more dangerous than the average tree. In temperate climates like ours, they typically live 400 to 500 years. There have been 6 tragic deaths from falling trees in Northern California in the last 14 years, but none of them have been from eucalyptus trees. 3 were from oak trees, and 1 each from an elm, a redwood, and a Monterey pine. If the city has heard arguments suggesting that eucalyptus trees are more dangerous than other trees, as a scientist, I'd be happy to help review the research. I searched the last 100 mentions of eucalyptus in the San Carlos e-packets, and I did not find any mention of such research. Individual trees of any species can become more likely than average to fall due to conditions like porous soil drainage or disease. So they need to be regularly inspected to prevent accidents like the tree that fell on a car during a windstorm in 2006. There are a few different ways to inspect trees. One is to visually inspect the trees, which has been done in 2005, 2015, and this year. In the 2015 report, the arborist Richard Huntington stressed this technique should not be taken as a complete hazard inspection. More accurate methods include a drill test or sonic tomography, 2 methods to measure the extent of decay within the tree. Drill tests are invasive measurements that involve cutting holes in the tree, while sonic tomography is a non-invasive scan of the tree that does not damage it. During the visual inspection this year, the arborist Kevin Keelty identified 3 trees for drill testing. After the drill test revealed decay, these trees were cut down. Because they've been identified as unsafe, the removal was allowed without any rewriting of the city code. The city now proposes to change the city code so that these founders trees can be removed without being identified as unsafe. But confusingly, it cites safety as a reason for doing so. Shannon Bergman commented on this before her dissenting vote in the Planning Commission meeting, where this recommendation was passed 2 to 1 out of 5, with 1 member absent and 1 recused. The safety argument seems to be based on the visual inspections that were conducted in 2005, 2015, and 2017, but the extreme inconsistency across these 3 inspections highlights how these visual inspections should not be used as a complete hazard inspection. The 2005 report conducted by Kevin Keelty when he was at Maine Tree Expert Company rated 2 of the trees as likely that the entire tree or large trunks would fall. The 2015 report conducted by Richard Huntington at Maine put 0 trees in this category. This year's report, conducted by Kevin Keelty, now at Keelty Arbor Services, put 16 trees in that category.
Mr. Haxton, could you sort of wrap it up?
Thank you. Yeah, I don't see any reason to change the city code to allow for the removal of all these mature and historic trees that provide scenery and shade along San Carlos Avenue. We should continue to use visual inspections to triage trees for more accurate assessments, but use those accurate assessments to determine if individual trees are unsafe. Our city code already allows for removal of these trees, so no revision of the city code should be necessary. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker is Nancy Oliver.
Thank you, Mayor Grassilli and the members of the City Council. I just wanted to talk a little bit about heritage, and part of it relates to these trees. They were planted by Julius Johnson, who was an employee of Mr. Phelps, and if you've read anything about Mr. Phelps, you know how important a man he was and who lived in San Carlos. Anyway, but sometimes when we come to talk here, I'm not sure that the City Council or the Planning Commission truly appreciate the historic landmarks that remain standing in our community. They seem to be disappearing before our very eyes, and we try to point them out, those significances, and I'm not sure our voices are always heard. I have heard and read the important observations made by other citizens regarding the proposed removal of these beautiful trees, really. And they do have special significance. They were mentioned in the 1991 Historic and Cultural Survey, and they really do have been here, like you say, 130 years. Although these trees have had ongoing assessment, should have had ongoing assessment by licensed arborists, that was not done. When landmarks are not kept up and are allowed to deteriorate, that is called demolition by neglect, which is actually illegal under CEQA law, and it could be challenged in court. So I think San Carlos has been guilty of demolition by neglect by not keeping up the trees along the years so that they would be healthy. Other cities that we've heard about have done that. And I'm sensing now that the city is determined to remove those trees whether or not they are diseased. If you use that argument that a tree might fall, you might as well come to White Oaks, where I live, and worry about all those oak trees, because they have dropped limbs, and indeed the whole trees have come over. I hope you wouldn't do that. They were there before we were. And also palm fronds. Have you ever been under a palm tree? If a palm frond drops, could be deadly. You have to be really careful about that argument, because I don't think it holds water. Under the terms of the protection under CEQA, at least the city can do is provide required HARS documentation of the beautiful lane-like quality of that area of San Carlos Avenue. And it would preserve the ambiance, at least with excellent photographs. So I not only ask for that type of documentation before you rule on removing all these trees, I demand it. And I want to caution San Carlos to be careful that our cultural resources do not fully disappear and that we are simply left with pictures in the museum, but we don't have any more of the real thing. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. The next speaker's card I have is Sandy Althouse, but she has indicated she wants to lend her 2 minutes to Josh Wallace. So we'll do that. Mr. Wallace.
Thank you. Good evening, council members, staff, Mr. Mayor. Sandy Althouse is my wife, and in service of domestic harmony, I will gladly read her passage, and perhaps time for mine, maybe not. We'll see. It's up to Mr.
Hers is read completely.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. It'll be on tape, right? I hope you reconsider the recommendation from the Planning Commission to lift the Founder's Tree title. Not only does it condemn the eucalyptus trees along San Carlos Ave, but it will send the wrong message to the residents when it comes to cutting trees on their property. San Carlos should be a tree city and inspire residents to preserve what's here. Of course, change is inevitable, but there's a desperate need to maintain some things that precede us. Slashing and burning is not good planning. Good planning incorporates the old with the new. The comment made by Commissioner Harper Peterson in the September 5th Planning Commission meeting saying Guy Phelps made a mistake by planting these trees 130 years ago and now we can fix it is presumptuous at best. These trees may not be native, but they flourish here. In fact, few things scream California more than a stand of eucalyptus trees shading the side of the road. Virtually all palm trees aren't native to California either, but they are nonetheless an icon. The plan to take down all of these eucalyptus trees is short-sighted. Some of them can be saved. They are not all diseased and not in danger of falling. The city should find a way to reestablish the Grand Boulevard San Carlos Ave was designed to be. Making it more pedestrian-friendly is a great start. However, making more room for more sidewalks will mean more trees along San Carlos Ave will have to be removed. And even the planting of new trees, the street will be barren for decades. Giving a nod to our past is smart planning. The city is a heritage in our hands and the hands to save some of it. The idea that cutting them all down while you're at it just to save money is wrong. These trees should be evaluated individually, and the Founder's Tree title will not only give the go-ahead to take all of these trees down, it'll send the message to residents that if the city doesn't do what it can to preserve historic trees, why should they? Please lead this city in a plan to preserve as many mature trees as possible. Maintaining the designation of Founder's Tree will set an example to residents to preserve mature trees and help protect the city's wide canopy of trees that is growing thinner every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Next speaker card I have is Cara Vonk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. My comments support preserving the 44 eucalyptus trees identified in the arborist report, and I respectfully disagree with the city's consultant, Ms. Jones. The 129-year-old tree line San Carlos Boulevard is a historic and cultural resource under federal, state, and local criteria, as well as the tree's designation as founders' trees in our tree ordinance. I will outline 4 of the U.S. Secretary of the Interior's criteria. First, the trees are associated with the life of an important person in our past. The trees were planted by Mr. Timothy Guy Phelps, the first American landowner in San Carlos, who purchased acreage from Donna Marie Arguello for his grain and cattle ranching interests. And I just noticed that there's an Arguello in our city seal here. He purchased Mrs. Arguello's adobe, built a board and batten house next door at Cedar and Magnolia Avenues, and later built a mansion on Old County Road. Mr. Phelps was a state legislator, helped establish San Mateo County, ran for governor, although he lost to Leland Stanford, was a U.S. senator, collector of customs in San Francisco, and a longtime regent of the University of California. Second, the trees have a historical association with the development patterns and trends that shape San Carlos. With the advent of railroad travel down the peninsula, Mr. Phelps was the first to recognize the suburban development potential of San Carlos, calling it Phelpsville. He therefore established a development pattern or trend that resulted in the city's incorporation after several more tries by others. Third, the eucalyptus trees represent a distinctive characteristic of a type, period, region, or method. Mr. Phelps was not immune to the City Beautiful movement sweeping the United States, which recognized that nature is beneficial to our physical and mental well-being. He beautified San Carlos Avenue, planting large, drought-tolerant trees well-suited to our environment. Eucalyptus trees are California's adopted trees. Burlingame's well-maintained eucalyptus trees lining El Camino Real and maintained as a historic resource. And what about San Francisco's Stern Grove, where thousands attend free summer concerts? The grove is actually a eucalyptus forest. The trees are of a distinctive type and landscaping in the period of our history. Fourth, the stand of eucalyptus trees are a character-defining feature of San Carlos and have maintained their integrity and feeling of association to history. Despite recent removal of 4 trees and loss of 2 others, 44 remain, according to the Arbus report, not an insignificant number. Driving west, in the first sweep of the curve, the stand of 4 enormous and stately trees fronting the medical building are impressive, setting the stage for the others to come, providing shade and a forest canopy. And I attached a photo to my written comments on the EIR. Most are located on the south side, where there are few or no houses that were never developed there, and adjacent to the creek. The trees tie us to our past history in feeling and association, as well as the other character-defining features, such as the historic train depot, Drake Building, and Hacienda Garden Apartments. No wonder San Carlos Avenue is designated a scenic road in our general plan.
Barbara, could you sort of wrap it up, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
I just want to make one last comment, and that is if the city is gifting public funds to remove trees that are responsibility of landowners, then the city must obtain a recordable agreement for planting replacement trees that runs with the land, because there's no room there to plant other trees. So anyway, thank you for listening, and please preserve and maintain our heritage for the future. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And the last speaker card I have is Sandra Menton.
Good evening, council and staff members. I am opposed to amending the San Carlos Municipal Code to remove founder trees from the list of heritage trees. It sets a precedent, and it also removes a natural resource. It will also eliminate a portion of our history. The city of San Carlos has an opportunity to combine the past with the future by bringing beauty to one of our busiest thoroughfares, San Carlos Avenue, from Sycamore up to the Alameda. A coalition of city staff and San Carlos residents and local landscapers could come together to build a design which would include the eucalyptus and established trees and shrubs, and in addition, adding a variety of flowering plants and trees. A walking path could also be included for all to enjoy. As the plan comes into place, it will draw our community together, as well as serving as a model for other cities along the peninsula and throughout California. Any plan that is developed for this area under review needs to be done before the eucalyptus are removed, and the budget must be set in place for completing the project, the new plan. Thank you for the time to express my concerns, and thank you for listening. As a PS to my notes, our neighbor to whatever direction we are, Belmont, has just opened a new park called the Davie Glen Park. If you go there, and I suggest that you do that, you will see a row of at least 10 eucalyptus trees on the north side, on the east side, which form a boundary for the park. It's really a beautiful sight to see. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else wishing to speak tonight on this item? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move we close the public hearing.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, gentlemen.
Mr. Mayor, I had two follow-on questions for staff.
Sure.
Thank you. I'm not sure who, I'll just throw it out there. So I don't remember if you guys touched on what the cost is of doing in-depth, I'll call it in-depth tree assessments, I guess, is where you drill a hole into the tree and assess the whether it's, how healthy it is, and whether or not that's part of whether that either is or could be part of a plan for assessing which trees to actually remove. I knew there was somebody out there who'd have the answer.
I can give you an idea on that. The tomograph that we talked about, Caltrans spent $6,000 on one tree and had it They had it tomographed, and the results were not very conclusive. The tree was removed anyway, but that was one of the El Camino trees. They had recently lost 2 trees on El Camino that fell across the street and hit an apartment across the street, which triggered that measuring. The ground radar, City of Burlingame, spent $4,000 on 2 trees, and that was quite inconclusive due to the fact they couldn't tell which tree the roots came from, or the diameter, like Lisa said, and the decay on the tree. Burlingame also spent $5,000 on, I don't know if you guys remember Tom the tree. It was a very large 96-inch diameter eucalyptus tree. They had hired myself and 2 other arborists to look at it. We climbed the tree, we did root crown examinations, we did drilling. That went to $5,000, and in that tree, we found the tree to be the healthiest one on the block. Still was removed, but, and so that gives you an idea where the cost of that stuff is. Generally, we don't do a drilling unless the mallet test shows some hollowness in the trunk, or we see decay like we did on the trees that we removed, and that's what usually triggers the drilling. Or sulfur fungus is growing on the tree also. Yeah.
Just as a quick follow-up to that, so it sounds like the drilling type approach is a second-order test that you do after first-order tests indicate, hey, there may be a problem here. And it sounds like it's somewhat, because you're actually looking inside the tree, it's somewhat more definitive of the state of the health of the tree?
Correct. But I keep referring to Burlingame. I do consulting for Burlingame. And what we found was it wasn't so much a trunk decay issue there. It was root failure in the storms. And what we found was large trees fell. They lost 5 this year. 5 trees that were well maintained. They prune them every 3 years. So they lost 5 trees this year. And what we found was very shallow and not large diameter root plate. And what roots were there were just shattered. They were decayed or just broke by the force of the tree failing. So
that's great. Thank you.
All right.
So, gentlemen.
Mr. Mayor, I will like to make a motion to adopt Resolution
2017-087.
-087, a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos adopting a mitigated negative declaration for the San Carlos Avenue tree removal project. And I move to introduce ordinance number...
We should do these one by
one at a time.
It said and, so I thought...
We should do one.
Okay,
we should do the mitigated negative declaration.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
All right, it's moved and seconded. So discussion? Mr. Collins?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank everybody for speaking tonight. My comments are, I don't want anybody to take them in the wrong way, because my colleagues are tired of hearing me say I grew up in this town. Family moved here in 1955. I lost track of all the times I walked up and down San Carlos Avenue, rode my bike under all those trees. So I've seen them over a good 60 years of my life. But they were planted 120 or more years ago, and, you know, all good things must come to an end. I think their time has come and gone. As a council member, as council members, our primary responsibility is the public safety of our citizens. In the last 11 years, either two entire eucalyptus trees or the branches of another eucalyptus trees have fallen on cars and injured people. Not one other tree of any other species that I'm aware of has done the same in that last 11 years, and I would venture probably in many more years than that. I just think that their ongoing danger outweighs their preservation. To the comment that the city's responsible for the maintenance, many of the trees are on private property. A lot of residents have not maintained those trees. So it has fallen on us to offer to help remove those trees. And they are expensive to take out. I have 2 giant redwoods in my backyard. My neighbor asked if I could take them out. I asked an arborist how much, and he said, $10,000 a tree. Well, $20,000 to take out 2 trees is a lot of money. Somebody made a comment about, maybe we should get rid of, or that we don't get rid of palm trees. I'd get rid of all the palm trees tomorrow. I think they're a public nuisance. I just don't think it's realistic to say that we ought to keep these trees. Burton Park, I think, is a great example of what I would call addition by subtraction. 23 ironbark trees were taken out 5 years ago. I think few people would argue that that park doesn't look better today than it did before. A lot of trees that people didn't know were there are flourishing. A lot of brand new trees were planted. And to the comment that, the trees aren't near anybody's properties, they're over 100 feet tall. There are many, many homes within 100 feet of those trees. If they fall north or south, I don't want it on my conscience that one of those trees fell through, crushed a house, and crushed someone inside. The liability of the city is incalculable. And of course, and that's one of the reasons I made the comment before, that we will have a plan to replace the trees. Some of the trees, some of you might have noticed that have been removed, when they are removed, what do you see behind them? You see more trees. There's live oak trees, there's maple trees, there's a lot of other trees that are behind those trees. So eventually, once those trees are out, and they won't all be taken out once, they'll be taken out one by one over a period of time. There will be a plan, and as long as I'm on the council, I'll make sure that we pursue that plan to plant native, attractive, well thought out, well-planned replacement trees that'll grow up to make that road as lovely as it looks now. And finally, the comment about Davy Park, or Davy Glen Park, that's a great park, but it's a park. It's not near a thoroughfare. It's not near a house. I don't think it's really a fair comparison. So I want people to understand why I'm voting the way I am. As I said, our primary responsibility is public safety, and I think the time has come that we have to face it and take that responsibility and proceed.
Mr. Olbert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I'll echo some of what Ron said, but I have a little bit different perspective on this. I actually really wish there was a way that we could maintain the trees. And I've spent a lot of time in talking to individuals and then talking to staff about various ideas and stuff. The problem seems to me come down to, what a recently famous federal official once called, it's the unknown unknowns that really cause you a problem. There are many times in many situations where I wish there was a way to simply assess a situation to know exactly what the state of it is so that we can make precisely the right decision or precisely the best decision. The difficulty is in real life that's almost impossible for anything except the really trivial kinds of situations, and this is not one of those. The last set of questions I asked the arborist about the utility and value of doing in-depth testing and drilling into trees was in fact targeted at the notion of, I was thinking of maybe suggesting that before we remove anything that we actually do an in-depth assessment of it. I'm still actually in favor of doing that, but I'm not going to even propose that we make that as a requirement because he has convinced me, as has my own reading, that you can do those assessments and say, hey, the tree looks good, and then it comes down. And it's because of its age and its nature and climate and who knows what else. Okay? That's the unknown parts. I do think it's really, really important that, it's not part of this action we're voting on right now, nor the next one as far as I can tell. It's really important that I think we make a public commitment to replace every tree that we take down to the extent we possibly can. It maybe not in the exact same location, but if we take a tree down, we can put a tree up someplace else, okay, someplace nearby. I think that's very important. Oddly enough, I would even be willing to have staff consider that the replacement trees perhaps be eucalyptus trees. And before anybody, like my colleague Ron, wonder if I've lost my mind, that was part of the reason I asked the question about when was the first failure of the eucalyptus tree. My sense is, from talking to people, they lived in San Carlos for a long time before they started coming down, okay? And, you know, there's different ways of maintaining heritage. You can maintain heritage with the exact same things, or you can maintain heritage with the same kind of thing. It's kind of like the city council. None of us are going to be here long enough, but there will be a city council sometime in the future, and that's part of our heritage too, even though the individuals come and go. So I'll leave that to staff to think about. There may not be anybody else in the dais who's willing to accept that, but it's kind of a little bit with a heavy heart that I'm going to support. You know, that's why I support this motion. But I just want people to understand that I appreciated all the time they spent coming forward and talking about things, and I really did listen carefully to what you said and did what I could in terms of my own research and talking to people about trying to see if there's a way to get out of this unknown box. So. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Other comments from the dais? Go ahead.
Okay. I don't want to add too much, but I am going to support this. I would just say some of the things I've said to people at coffee that have talked to me about this, because I'm at the plantation every morning, and this has come up. And my feeling on it is, unlike buildings, you know, buildings have to be built, and, you know, a lot of goes into putting up a building. And so, for instance, I thought, you know, these ladies know when the Hacienda Garden Apartments were being slated to be torn down, I was all in support of trying to save that because it was a treasure. And there was a lot going on there architecturally that I just don't think was appreciated, as you ladies know. Trees I see as a little different. Number one, these trees, regardless of whether or not they are a safety issue, and I believe they are. I had a cyclist friend tragically and just out of the blue killed by a tree branch that fell off of a eucalyptus tree in Los Altos and killed him. Myself, I still do a lot of cycling, and every time I have to go past eucalyptus trees when I'm on Woodside Road or parts of Woodside or in San Carlos, on San Carlos Avenue, especially if there's a little wind in the afternoon, it's a little disconcerting. And you see the branches that, it's really unusual with eucalyptus trees where, compared to other trees, they get this growth around the branch, and then you see this dead branch sticking out. And if nobody cuts that off, that thing's dangerous. I don't see that kind of thing with other trees. The closest you can come to it is on redwood trees as they grow taller. And you see the lower branches. It's called duff. You know, those branches just fall off. Not nearly as big, though, usually. Anyways, that's my biggest concern is the safety issue. And that's what I've said to people, like the coffee shop talking about it. I also feel like, you know, with trees compared to buildings, you can plant new trees, and years from now, they'll be beautiful. I remember, you know, speaking again about the project across the street. When Chris Withman told us, oh, we're going to put trees up and that's going to soften it, and I thought, yeah, right. That'll take forever. Look across the street. Look at the trees that were planted. That wasn't so many years ago, and those trees are as large and as healthy as the trees on this side of the street in front of City Hall that have been there longer. We planted trees at Burton Park. I was trying to find, Amy, a current picture of what we did there, where we took down the black bark eucalyptus and planted new trees. And today it looks great. That wasn't even that many years ago that we did that. So trees grow, and hopefully what we do, and this is my closing comment, is I'm happy that if you look at the next steps that are on our handout here, one of them is staff will retain a consultant to work on a tree planting plan with the pedestrian safety improvement plan for San Carlos Avenue, similar to what you were talking about, Sandy, to have a plan. And that's what we want to do. So hopefully what we do in 2017, 2018, and 19, whenever all this happens, 50 years from now, people will say, boy, council really made the right decision, and look at these beautiful trees, whatever species we come up with, hopefully something native, and we'll have people appreciating that and appreciating the new heritage of San Carlos. So that's my feeling about it.
All right, thank you. Mr. Johnson?
So trees are one of the things that makes living in San Carlos such a nice such a nice thing. And just a couple weeks ago, I was out with some volunteers planting a new tree at Burton Park. Just 2 weeks ago, my son and I together planted a new tree in our backyard. I'm going to support this, very reluctantly. We don't want to take the trees out, but we believe we've had a tree came down in 2006 and crushed a car. A tree came down just a few months ago near a school. We can't, or I can't, in good conscience, go forward knowing that, a tree could come down and seriously injure or kill someone in this city. And as my colleague said, we're going to put together a plan that comes up with some really nice replacement trees. So I appreciate the passion for folks who want to preserve those trees. I understand it, but in this case, I think we have to side on the side of public safety.
Okay, thank you for your comments. I'm going to support this measure also, but I am not, just because I support it doesn't mean I'm going to go for 63 trees. I would like staff to be a little more specific, and perhaps, Mr. Kilty, I can understand 12 is bad. I get that. Is 8 bad, or is 8, or how about 5, or 4, or 3? So some of these are ranked in different ways, and I'd really like to really dive down and understand what they are, because just because they're on the list doesn't mean they have to go. But I do echo my colleagues' comments about safety, especially where this is located, the walkway to Arundel School. Kids are there every day. And like I said, just because we vote this way doesn't mean we're going to vote that way the next time, and that's when we're going to decide what we're going to do on whether we're going to take them out. So if staff could give some more details on what the levels are, I'd really appreciate it. All right, so we have a motion, and we have some discussion. A roll call, please.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
And Mayor Grisilli?
Yes. All right, there's another item here. Is there an ordinance that someone wants to make a motion on?
Yeah, I'll make a move to introduce ordinance number
1524.
1524, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Carlos amending the San Carlos zoning ordinance, section 18.41.020, removing Founder's Tree from the definition of protected trees.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, all right. Discussion? Any comments?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Olbert?
Mr. Mayor, I'll try to be a lot briefer this time. Two things. One is I do hope when the specific plans come back that we incorporate in them a commitment, as I mentioned before, to replace the trees. I want to see that in the specific plan that comes back for removing trees. And then the other sort of general topic that I'd like staff to think about, and I certainly appreciate the concerns that folks on limited incomes have dealing with a $10,000 or $20,000 exposure to remove a tree. I am a little bit hesitant to simply spend public money in those situations. Personally, I would rather have to remove any tree that was on private property that was targeted for removal. I personally would rather see us do something like the programs that we have in other areas, where if somebody has a particular financial situation that we need to address, that we help them, kind of like we do with the low-income things on garbage rates and sewer rates and whatnot. So I don't have a specific recommendation on how to do that. Nobody else may feel that need, but that's an input that I'd like to see considered, because I do want to make sure that we properly spend public money. Thanks.
All right. Any other comments? Otherwise, call the question. Go ahead. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
And Mayor Grisilli?
Yes. All right. Thank you. And we will revisit this. Mr. City Manager, when do you expect that we would have this back?
I wouldn't expect this will be back until probably just after the first of the year.
All right, just want to get a feel for the time. Thank you. All right, moving on. Next item is 10A, consideration of adopting a city impacted by Hurricane Harvey. Ms. Peterson?
Good evening, Council. My name is Tara Peterson, Assistant City Manager. Before you this evening for your discussion and consideration is the possibility of adopting a city impacted by Hurricane Harvey. So little information about the hurricane. Its highest winds were 130 miles per hour. It lasted from August 17th to September 3rd. There were 83 fatalities, and 13 million people were impacted in the states of Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Kentucky. Hurricane Harvey made landfall in Texas on August 25th, and thus far it appears to be one of the most damaging natural disasters in U.S. history, just behind Hurricane Katrina, although that could change with some of the other more recent hurricanes and other disasters. At the September 11th council meeting, council directed staff to research communities in Texas to determine their need and to provide information to council to discuss the possible adoption of a city. Staff reached out to a number of communities, about 25, and 3 of the communities got back to us and were able to provide us some information about the storm's impact and their needs. So the 3 cities that got back to us were Dickinson, Smithville, and LaGrange. So a little facts about Dickinson. This city is located between Houston and Galveston. It has a population of approximately 19,000. 75% of the homes were damaged and 18% were destroyed by flooding. 50% of the businesses suffered major damage or were destroyed. In speaking with Dickinson, they said that any financial assistance would be welcome and it would help fund the city's Hurricane Harvey Relief Fund. The next city is Smithville. It is located approximately halfway between Houston and Austin along the Colorado River, which flooded and caused a significant amount of damage on communities along the river. This is a small town of approximately 4,200. About 70 homes were damaged by the flooding, and 135 of its citizens were evacuated to the city shelter. When speaking with this city, funding would be welcome and would be used to help cover the cost to replace the cots, blankets, and supplies used during the evacuation. And the last city is LaGrange. It is very close to Smithville along the Colorado River. Has a population of 4,700 people. The major damage was, of course, caused by the river flooding, and over 500 homes were damaged or destroyed. When speaking with LaGrange, they said, of course, financial help is welcome. Currently, the Rotary Club is helping pay for bills for victims, particularly utility bills. And then the Combined Community Action Group is assisting with temporary housing costs. And any kind of funding that would come to this city would be helpful for both of those agencies. So with that, just summarizing, well, we talked about this on September 11th. Many different disasters have occurred. We've had Hurricane Irma in Florida, Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, the earthquakes in Mexico, and of course what's happening up in the North Bay currently. And lastly, some of the cities that we looked at where we weren't able to speak with them, but able to look at their websites, had recommended donating to the Red Cross, as that would be helpful to all communities affected. And with that, I'm welcome to any questions or just discussion.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really just wanted to have a little discussion and maybe suggest something to my colleagues, if it's appropriate to do so now.
If you have questions, why don't we do questions first? Okay, Mr. Grocott, if there's any questions.
Yeah, the question I have is if staff had any discussion about what role we would play as a city, because looking back at what we did before with Pass Christian, that was actually an initiation by the Chamber of Commerce, not the city. So I'm a little curious if staff's had any discussion to recommend to council. Do we do this differently? Do you have some idea of what we would do specifically as a city?
We don't have any recommendation. We did speak to representatives that were supported by the chamber. They were collecting donations for a high school in Houston. There was a connection there between a member of the faculty and this area. And so when they reached out to this person, they said that would be very helpful. So they did that on their own, and there's been no other discussions about what other kind of communities we could look at. At this point in time, there's been no connection with this area, and so all we did was look at some of the worst impacted cities, and the ones that got back to us were the ones that are listed.
Okay, Mr. Olbert, questions?
Yes, thank you. Building off of that one, and I think I know the answer to it, but it doesn't sound like anybody from the chamber or anybody elsewhere in the community came forward other than for the high school program you're talking about, which is completed at this point, as I understand it, to basically say there's a connection from, me in San Carlos to some community here, right? Correct. So to Matt's point, that is a little different than Pass Christian. By the way, just as an aside, at some point, maybe we should, as a council, think about recognizing and honoring the folks who did the high school support, just because they're San Carlos citizens. It was a nice thing they did. I'd certainly like to see them honored, but I'll leave it up to the mayor to decide. The last question I had is, depending on how we move forward with this, if we don't pick a particular community, this is a question for Greg, are we able to take this information that staff has gathered and post it on the website so that it's publicly available for people, that we're not sort of recommending that, you should do this rather than something else, but we want to share the benefits of what we learned?
I am, but certainly that could be put on the website with some direction from the council or featured in some way on the website, sure.
Okay. Yeah, if the council chooses to do that. All right, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Johnson, now, go ahead.
So, as Tara pointed out, since the hurricane in Texas, there's been a lot of other natural disasters. I believe when we discussed this at our previous meeting, the idea, I think, is really to use the city as a way to amplify and focus attention for people who want to be charitable after a natural disaster, which is a great idea. I think the challenge is that by the time we can get a public meeting together and get something focused and have all the staff time happen, a lot of time the attention is moved on, and what you really want to do is focus people's attention in the first few days after something happens. What I was going to suggest, potentially rather than adopt a particular city, is to have staff draw up some policy whereby the mayor and the city manager can, at their discretion, decide to provide information to the public using whatever communication channels we have available to say, hey, there's been a natural disaster, there's been a tragedy, and here's how you, citizens of San Carlos, can have a positive impact. Here's the best uses of your charity. And that way, it would allow us, kind of in the spirit of what we're trying to get at here, to be able to communicate and focus attention in the first 24, 48 hours after a natural disaster.
Okay.
Comment?
Yeah, I think I'm going to jump in just for a second, because Matt and I run the council when you went down there, in fact, to Pass Christian. And, again, it was the Chamber of Commerce that spearheaded this. I'm not sure how that city was selected, but regardless, it was selected by private citizens, and the city helped support, and people went down there. I did not, but Matt did, I know. The difficulty I have, with this now, I mean, it didn't have it then, but as you mentioned, this has been 2 weeks of hell. Where do you, even today, I know a person who lost their house in Kenwood, a personal friend. And I don't know where it starts or where it stops. I certainly think that for all these disasters, we could put information on the, sort of to Mr. Johnson's point, information on the website to say, hey, if folks for Texas or Florida or Puerto Rico or Las Vegas or Sonoma, Napa, et cetera, Napa, Sonoma counties, this is where you can, donate or whatever. I think that's wonderful information. But to select one or to select part of it, I don't know how I don't think I could vote for any of that. I'm not sure I could because there's just so much out there. But that's just me personally. Mr. Collins?
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, my only problem with this is not that we shouldn't do something, but we have LaGrange, we have Dickinson, we have Smithville, we have Puerto Rico, we have several places in Florida, and this is happening with greater regularity. There was another tropical storm that hit Mississippi, I think, over the weekend. These things are just going to keep happening, particularly with climate change. So I kind of like Cameron's idea of maybe setting up a protocol, some sort of guidelines that the city could lay out for our residents, that when these things happen, we make them prominent on our social media that say, if you really want to help, here's what we suggest you do. Because otherwise we're going to have this discussion every year. Who do we adopt? Who do we help?
Mm-hmm. Every week. Mr. Olbert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I like Cameron's idea a lot, and I have the same sort of concerns after we tasked staff with doing this. It's kind of like, well, gee, we needed to tell the Mother Nature to stop handing us disasters until we were ready to do the next one. And in fact, the only two comments that I'd make is, one, I think we need to, and I think people are just using the word by accident, I think we need to be careful about whatever we publicize, not saying like, here's what you should do or here's the best way. It's more like, here are some ways that you could consider helping. And it's really more of a clearinghouse kind of function. And yes, it would take a little bit of staff time to do that. But I think there are elements of our community who would appreciate that. I know I would certainly go there trying to figure out, well, how do I help? Okay.
It's something we wouldn't have to do every year.
Correct. It's just an ongoing thing. As there are big disasters, the mayor and the city manager talk about what's there, and they put something up there and let it go. I think it's a great idea.
Okay, Mr. Grocott, final comment?
Final comment is I would only see us doing something as a city if the community takes the lead on it. Mm-hmm. That's what happened with Pass Christian, right. And I don't see that happening this time. I see a lot of, not a lot, but I've seen some chatter through emails and so forth on Nextdoor, for instance, but nothing, really coming together the way it did with Pass Christian. However, having said that, I think, I try to think, what if something happened to us, similar to what happened this weekend in Napa and up in the North Bay? How would we feel sitting here all alone, trying to look for help, waiting for FEMA and so forth? I think in the case of the North Bay, we should be looking for opportunities. Neighbors help neighbors. Mm-hmm. And I think if there's a way that we could look in the North Bay for some way to help one of those cities up there, perhaps we choose one that's more like our size, around 28,000, 30,000 people, and do something. Do something. We've got reserve money. I'm reluctant to spend public money in that way, but I think in this case, it's in this area, it's in California, it's just up the road. And, I'm almost choking up talking about it, but I think there's something we need to do.
Why don't we, Mr. Malpe, why don't you or Tara, easy to give you work to do, right? Take a look to see, you've heard the comments up here, and see if you can take a look and see if there's some way that we can do action in the next couple, in other words, bring it back, if it's possible to bring it back to the next meeting? Is that possible?
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a quick question?
Just one second. I want to hear Mr. Malpe.
I don't think that that's possible. Not in terms of the type of policy we're talking about.
Okay.
I was planning on speaking a little bit to the issue of the fires that are happening in Northern California under my city manager communications.
Okay.
But I can do so now if the council would
Sure,
like.
why don't you go ahead.
Yeah, Engine 16 was deployed this morning as part of the County Strike Force 1. Redwood City put a second engine into Strike Force 2 that was deployed this afternoon. We have deputies that are on the ground in Santa Rosa right now. I've put 3 to 4 management positions on the OES, the state OES list, as employees that we could send up there once they get to that point where they start to need shift relief in their emergency operations centers. And we're prepared to send a 2-man crew along with equipment and supplies from Public Works as well, if requested, through OES. So we're prepared to make a significant commitment if one is needed from this area, and I think that'll depend on how long these fires go. As you know, once you start operating an emergency operations center, typically for something like a fire, works very well for 24 to 36 hours, and after that, you know, your employees need to sleep, they need to eat. Some of these folks that are working, some of these emergency responders and public employees that are working this disaster lost their own homes and have had family members who have lost their homes in the fire, and they're going to need some time to deal with that as well. So, you know, speaking to your comments, Councilmember Grocott, you know, the city will definitely be making any resources available that are requested, that it's reasonable for us to provide while still maintaining our own ability to respond to our own emergencies in the community. And, you know, we'll look for any other opportunities and requests for mutual aid or supplies that come along, and we'll respond to those immediately. And if anything requires council action, we'll bring that to you in a timely manner.
Mr. Olbert.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, one other question. Jeff, am I hallucinating, or did I hear from Stan or Dave that some of the fire resources were actually deployed to the Houston area?
Yeah, you know, you did hear correctly. We did have emergency personnel from the county.
So we actually do deploy on significantly scaled national issues.
Yeah, California is such a large state, so densely populated, that we are definitely a major contributor in the United States, particularly the Western United States. In terms of disaster response, California sends more equipment out of state than what we receive. But other states, you know, Texas is a large state too, and they have a large capacity as well.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear that, and I certainly think it's great that we're providing similar support to our neighbors up north, and certainly happy to consider if somebody wants to come back with a particular recommendation for something more than the resources Jeff was talking about to Northern California. But I'll just make the comment that to me personally, frankly, I view all these people as, in the various parts of the country, as part of my community. I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm part of multiple communities. I'm not just a San Carlos. I live in California, and I live in the United States. And if the disaster is big enough someplace else, I'm happy to pitch in there, too. It doesn't just have to be in California.
Okay. Perhaps in the first quarter, we could possibly...
Yeah, we'll get it back to you as soon as
first
we
quarter.
can.
That's fine. That's fine.
There's a little
Possibly
research
some ideas that we might be able to kick
so.
around relative to what was mentioned on the dais.
Yeah,
All right.
I think we got the feedback we were looking for.
Good.
So.
All right, moving on. Number 11. Unfinished business, consideration of approving a resolution setting a public hearing on November 27th, 2017 to consider 2018, 19, and 2020 residential and commercial solid waste collection service rates pursuant to Prop 218. Mr. Walter.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. Jay Walter, Public Works Director. This can be as short an item as you would like it to be. But essentially, if you remember at our last meeting, we had a glitch in the title of the agenda item in terms of the setting a 3-year rate increase scenario. And so what we've done is we've corrected that item title. We have, wherever the reference was to the solid waste rates for 2018, we've included 2018, 2019, 2020. We have incorporated suggested changes to the Prop 218 notice and have revised that notice, and it's included as part of your package. So tonight I did not plan on making a long presentation again because you essentially heard the item last meeting. But just in case you have further questions, we do have representatives from Ecology in the audience, as well as our financial consultant, Alex Handlers from Bartle Wells. So with that, I'll just take questions. But essentially, we have revised this item to be able to have you set the date for the 218 hearing on November 27th.
Thank you, Mr. Walter. Questions? Mr. Olbert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Jay. First off, an observation. I very much appreciate the tweaks that staff made to the Prop 218 notice. I actually think it actually does not that the other one was bad, I think it does a nicer job of explaining why we're doing stuff, which I think is helpful to a lot of citizens. Just sort of for the record, I want to make sure before I vote on this, this is the plan that basically starts to fix some of both the commercial versus residential discrepancies, let's call it, of cost versus revenue, and also addresses the same type of problem as it exists within the different sizes of residential carts. Is that correct?
That is correct.
It looked like it to me so I just want to make sure. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move...
Excuse me, I apologize. Wait 1 second. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none. Okay.
I think Gina wants to say something.
No, it's okay.
You don't say get out of here.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Motion,
no,
please.
Okay. No, sorry. I move to adopt Resolution 2017-88, a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos setting a public hearing on November 27th, 2017 to consider 2018, 2019, and 2020 residential and commercial solid waste collection service rates pursuant to Proposition 218.
I second.
Okay, there's a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
And Mayor Grisilli?
Yes. Okay, item 12. Thanks, gentlemen.
Item
Council
12.
communications and announcements. Anyone have any announcements?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Two, actually. One is that I'm sure you all have heard about how Belmont and Redwood City have been either talking about or moving forward with making adjustments to their minimum wage statutory environment, I guess I'll call it. I'm not sure they had minimum wages defined previously other than the state ones. And we had talked about that at a council strategic planning discussion, I believe, early this year, and then tabled the item because of concerns about the staff resources that might be taken up to have to study it. And I just wanted to bring the issue back to see if there's interest in having some, at least preliminary discussion on the dais of whether we should do something like that in San Carlos, with the idea being that we can save the staff time by living off of the work that Belmont and Redwood City are doing, which admittedly they're different communities, but there's a lot of overlap. So it was just kind of an idea I wanted to tee up, see if anybody else wants to bring this issue back a little bit more live than where we left it.
Gentlemen?
I'm sorry, I'm confused.
Which part? The whole topic?
The notion of looking at what other cities are doing on various things so that we can maybe...
Oh, let me back up.
Yeah.
We talked about, as a group, whether or not we ought to have a discussion about enacting some kind of minimum wage regulation in San Carlos. As I recall, maybe I'm recalling wrong, there was general support for having that discussion, but we then later said, this is too busy a year, staff is too busy. And so that's where the second idea came in because we never had the in-depth kind of discussion about it. And, for all I know, there's no interest on the council in actually doing it. Or maybe there's interest, but once people sort of start kicking the tires on it, they go, forget it, not interested. I'm just looking to see whether we want to bring the issue back and make it a little bit more live. using this other neighboring community stuff.
Doesn't sound like it this year. Maybe next year, possibly, because of all the things that are going on. But other comments or communications?
Yes, I have one other.
Yes, sir.
This one is also an item to see if we want to agendize something. Given the very horrific event that occurred in Las Vegas the other week or last week, California has some very robust gun control laws, and we've recently improved them as a state. Personally, as a member of the council, I wouldn't mind having a staff presentation and discussion from both, I'm thinking both Rubens and Rothaus here, probably leading the charge on it, about whether there are any other things that we could reasonably think about doing locally that might help improve the situation as it relates to mass gun violence. I know it's a very important topic for people, but people often are kind of like, well, I'm not sure what we can do. And I'm not trying to say I have 3 items that I want us to act on, but I'd at least like to have our experts come in and talk to us about what might be possible so that we could at least have a discussion, because I just think it's a very serious topic.
I'd be in support of that.
We're one short, so.
Well, at least I got one that time.
That's true. Mr. Collins.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple things. A couple of meetings, committees I sit on. The Heart Board voted to loan $3.5 million to Palo Alto Housing to construct 67 all of 100% affordable housing units in Redwood City on county property. County Board of Supervisors, I think, is going to act to rezone the area, and so that is one of the first major things since I've been on the Heart Board for 5.5 years that we've really been able to do. The money obviously came from the county. The county loaned Heart $5 million to do exactly this, and we're really proud to have a project now to put out there. The second thing is I also went to the Caltrain electrification meeting last week. And very soon, probably in the next 12 months or so, if you drive up and down El Camino, anywhere near the tracks, you're going to see poles and wires being installed. And if you need more information, you can go to caltrain.com/PCE construction, and there's a whole site just dedicated to all the poles and wires are going to be going up for the trains. They expect the first train to roll off and be operational in 2020.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Grocott?
So a couple things. One, something that kind of on the personal level, I sent an email out to some of the staff and council members asking for support for the Canary Challenge, the bike ride I did, and thank you for the support that I received. You did. You gave me, gave me a check. It's tough getting old, Bob. So.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, so many things have happened, as we talked about. But anyways, sort of an after-action report. I did the ride. It was challenging because I haven't gone that far since my own cancer treatment. I did the ride in memory of a gal I knew in Foster City who passed away from a second battle with breast cancer. But personally, I raised about $900, and I think all told, their goal was to raise $1 million, and they didn't quite get there. They got to about $750,000, but it was still pretty good, yeah. So there's that. And then I just wanted to report, I went to the last airport roundtable meeting, and if folks, there's not too many complaints coming from San Carlos, but like for instance where Jeff lives, his city is really getting hammered with some things that the FAA did on the routes of the planes. Basically what they've done is they've moved them off of the ocean and more over land, and they've put them into a kind of a tube, if you will, if you think of a big tube up in the sky, so they're not fanned out as much. And people are really complaining about the noise, and it's, like I said, it's a problem in especially coastal communities and some other communities in the area. But the roundtable's working on the issue and trying to get the FAA to move in a certain direction. It's just like moving a a big battleship in the ocean. It takes a lot.
Okay. Mr. Johnson.
Just one item. I met with a couple of residents who are members of a group called the what are they called? The Citizens Climate Lobby, which I think other folks may have met with. They're pushing a piece of legislation in Congress that would add a price on carbon, and the revenue would be paid out as a dividend. It's a bipartisan piece of legislation in which for every Republican they add to the bill, they're adding one Democrat. Based on their website, I see 16 cities in the state of California that have endorsed this idea, and the state of California. I've been told, although not independently verified, that this is coming up before the county at their next meeting. So I thought it was something that would be worth looking at, given all the work that we've been doing on our climate action plan and Peninsula Clean Energy, and I wanted to see if any of my colleagues would agree.
They met with, I guess, Ron and I jointly, and we've been having some ongoing discussions and whatnot. I'm still doing some, I like the idea, but I'm still doing some research on it, so I'm not at this point interested in doing it, but I don't know whether anybody else is.
Okay. All right. Staff comments, besides what you had.
Yeah, just two real quick. I left off our list of resources just to let the council know on the Northern California fires that our deputy fire chief has been called up as well. He's going to be heading up to the Santa Rosa area to take over a portion of command on Thursday. And I guess I have mixed feelings about this next one. I'm sad yet happy for him as well to be letting you all know and the public know that Jay Walter, our Public Works Director, has informed me that he's going to be retiring and heading back home to San Luis Obispo December 22nd.
I move that we enslave Jay Walter.
Third.
Sorry, Jay.
Good try.
Deal with his wife. I don't think you want to do that.
They only love you after you're gone. What's that about, Jay?
That's it? All right. Well, needless to say, we'll discuss this a couple more times before you head off into the sunset. We won't have a meeting on the 22nd. We have one meeting in December. What day is that? Do we know? It's the 9th, the 10th, 12th, okay. 11th. Let's figure out something to do that night besides have a new mayor, and we'll see if we can do something. Anything else, gentlemen? If not, meeting adjourned. Thank you.